Tonight we walk beneath ancient stars, toward a mountain that rises above the world of mortals. Before we begin, if you enjoy these quiet journeys through myth and history, consider subscribing and returning for future evenings beside the fires of the ancient world. Now, settle comfortably, let the day drift away, and together, let us climb toward Olympus, far above the sleeping lands of Greece, beyond forests of pine and cypress, beyond valleys silvered by moonlight. The mountain stood beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The air was cold there, thin and still. Only distant winds moved across the dark slopes. The ancient Greeks imagined Olympus as the dwelling place of the gods, not merely a mountain of stone and snow, but a sacred realm hidden from ordinary sight. There, beyond mortal reach, stood shining halls where divine beings gathered beneath roofs brighter than polished marble. Yet even among immortals, mysteries existed. And one of the greatest mysteries began with a prophecy, long before Athena was born. Zeus ruled the heavens. You can almost picture him now. The king of the gods sat within a vast hall illuminated by golden fire. Pillars rose toward a ceiling hidden in shadow. The scent of cedar wood drifted through the air. Outside, clouds rolled across the peaks of Olympus. Despite his power, Zeus understood something every ruler eventually learns. No throne is ever completely secure among the titans before him. Kings had risen and fallen. His father, Cronus, had feared prophecy. His grandfather, Uranus, had feared it as well. Both had discovered that destiny could not easily be defeated. And now destiny approached Zeus. The warning came from ancient powers older than the Olympians themselves. Some traditions speak of Gaia, the Earth Mother. Others tell of mysterious prophetic voices hidden deep within the fabric of creation. Whatever the source, the message was clear. A child born from the goddess Metis would possess extraordinary wisdom. Even more troubling, another child might someday surpass Zeus himself. The warning echoed through Olympus like distant thunder. Ancient audiences understood the significance immediately. Greek myths often remind listeners that wisdom can be more powerful than strength. And Metis embodied wisdom. Her name itself suggested cleverness, insight, and careful thought. She was not a warrior. She carried no spear. Yet many believed her gifts surpassed those of stronger beings. Zeus admired her greatly. Perhaps he even loved her. But prophecy has a way of changing hearts, especially among gods. One evening, as golden light faded across Olympus, Zeus made a decision that would alter the course of myth forever. He swallowed Metis. The story sounds strange to modern ears. Even ancient Greeks likely understood it symbolically. Some believed it represented wisdom becoming part of Zeus himself. Others interpreted it differently. Historians continue to debate exactly how early audiences understood the tale. Yet all versions agree on one thing. Metis did not disappear. Deep within Zeus, she remained alive. And so did the child she carried. Time passed, months perhaps, or years. Myth rarely measures time as mortals do. Meanwhile, Olympus remained peaceful. Gods attended feasts. Sacred fires burned through the night. The stars crossed silently overhead. Yet strange signs began to appear. Priests reported unusual dreams. Birds flew in unexpected patterns above shrines. Travelers spoke of distant storms forming beneath cloudless skies. No one knew exactly what these omens meant, or perhaps some suspected. One night Zeus sat alone, outside his palace. Moonlight covered the marble terraces. Silver light reflected from polished stone. The world seemed calm, but inside the king of the gods, something was changing. A pain began. At first it was small, then it grew. The pain spread through his head like lightning trapped beneath flesh. Zeus rose from his throne. Thunder rumbled across the heavens. Clouds gathered around Olympus. Winds raced through sacred groves. The other gods heard the storm and hurried toward the palace. They found Zeus pacing through vast halls. His face was strained. His eyes flashed like distant lightning. No remedy brought relief. No divine power eased the pain. The prophecy was awakening. Outside, darkness covered the mountain. Torchlight flickered along shining corridors. The scent of burning oil mixed with cold air drifting through open archways. Some stories say the gods themselves grew afraid. For if Zeus could suffer, what did that mean? What force could trouble the ruler of heaven? Different traditions preserve different answers. Some say Hermes offered advice. Others say Prometheus understood the truth. Another interpretation survives in scattered fragments. Yet the central event remains unchanged. At last Zeus summoned Hephaestus, the divine craftsman. The god of the forge arrived carrying tools shaped from celestial bronze. The flickering light reflected from metal surfaces. Around them stood the gathered Olympians, watching, waiting. No one could fully know what destiny intended. Then came the command. Hephaestus raised his great axe. The blade flashed and struck. The mountain shook. Thunder exploded across the sky for a brief moment. All creation seemed suspended between silence and sound. Then something extraordinary happened. From the opening in Zeus's head emerged a radiant figure, not an infant, not a helpless child, a fully grown goddess. She appeared clad in gleaming armor. A bronze helmet crowned her head. A spear shone in her hand. Her shield reflected firelight and starlight together as she stepped forward. A cry rang across heaven. Some ancient poets described it as a battle shout. Others imagined it as a sound of triumph. Either way, the universe seemed to acknowledge her arrival. Athena had been born. The image remained unforgettable for generations. Wisdom emerging directly from the mind of Zeus. Knowledge joined to power. Strategy joined to authority. Thought joined to action. The symbolism was profound, and ancient listeners understood it well. Strength alone rarely builds civilizations. Strength alone rarely guides heroes. Wisdom must stand beside it. Athena represented that balance. The storm outside began to fade. Clouds drifted apart. Stars slowly returned. Moonlight once again touched the slopes of Olympus. The gods gazed upon their newest companion. Some felt admiration. Others perhaps felt uncertainty. For prophecies rarely end with their fulfillment. They usually begin there. Athena herself seemed calm, unlike many gods. She showed little interest in chaos. Her eyes carried the stillness of deep thought. Her presence suggested confidence without arrogance. Yet mysteries surrounded her birth. Even now, scholars remain divided over certain details. Different cities preserved different versions. Different poets emphasized different meanings. But all agreed that something remarkable had entered the world. Far below Olympus, mortals slept beneath dark skies. Fishing boats rested in quiet harbors. Sacred fires burned low within village shrines. Waves rolled gently against distant shores. Most people knew nothing of what had happened above them. Yet their destinies had already changed. For the goddess who would shape kings, heroes, inventors, and cities had arrived. And somewhere beyond the horizon of the future, another prophecy waited. A prophecy connected not to gods, but to mortals. Heroes not yet born. Heroes Athena would one day guide. Heroes whose choices would echo across ages. The stars moved slowly overhead. The night deepened. And on the heights of Olympus, Athena took her first steps into destiny. The night after Athena's birth seemed unusually clear. You stand in imagination upon the slopes of Olympus, where cold winds drift through dark pines and distant stars burn above snow-covered ridges. The storm that accompanied her arrival has passed. Only silence remains. Yet it is not an empty silence. It feels expectant, as though the world itself is waiting. Athena had entered existence in a manner unlike any other god. No cradle welcomed her. No years of childhood shaped her growth. She stepped directly into immortality, carrying armor, wisdom, and purpose. The Greeks found meaning in this image. Many ancient listeners believed wisdom did not emerge from chance. It required preparation, discipline, and understanding. Athena arrived already possessing these qualities. In the halls of Olympus, the gods gathered to observe their newest companion. Golden torchlight flickered against polished columns. Warm scents of cedar and incense drifted through the air. Beyond open terraces, moonlight shimmered across clouds far below. Athena moved among the immortals with calm confidence. She neither boasted nor demanded attention. This alone distinguished her from many divine beings. Some gods embodied passion, others embodied desire. Some delighted in conflict. Athena seemed different. She watched, she listened, she considered. Even Zeus appeared fascinated. The prophecy that had troubled him for so long had finally revealed its first answer. Instead of a rival, a daughter had emerged. A daughter whose wisdom reflected the gifts of Metis. Perhaps this brought him comfort. Perhaps it brought uncertainty. The old warning still lingered like an echo. Ancient prophecies rarely revealed every detail at once. Among the gods, Only the Fates truly understood the complete design. And the Fates spoke very little. The three mysterious sisters existed beyond ordinary power. Even Zeus respected their authority. They spun, measured, and cut the threads of every life, gods included. This belief reflected a profound Greek idea. Even divine beings lived within a larger order. Destiny existed above personal desire. As Athena walked the halls of Olympus, she surely understood this better than most. One evening, not long after her birth, a strange dream came to several priests serving distant shrines. At least that is what later traditions claimed. The dream showed an owl flying across a moonlit sky. Below it stretched countless roads. Some led toward prosperity, others toward ruin. The owl landed upon a spear, then vanished into darkness. No explanation accompanied the vision, only mystery. Ancient audiences loved such stories. Dreams often served as bridges between mortal and divine worlds. Whether the dream truly occurred remained uncertain. Historians continued to debate which traditions emerged earliest. Yet the symbolism endured. The owl would become Athena's sacred companion, a creature associated with perception and understanding, an animal able to see clearly while others struggled in darkness. Soon Athena began exploring every corner of Olympus. You can imagine her wandering through vast gardens nourished by immortal springs. Silver leaves shimmer in moonlight. Fresh water sings over stone channels. The air smells faintly of wild herbs carried by mountain winds. Here she met many divine relatives. Some welcomed her warmly, others observed from a distance. Among them stood Ares, god of war. The contrast between them fascinated Greek storytellers. Both possessed martial qualities. Both understood battle. Yet they represented entirely different visions of conflict. Ares embodied fury. Athena embodied strategy. Ares reflected violence unleashed. Athena reflected violence controlled. The distinction mattered deeply. Ancient Greek audiences admired courage, but they also valued discipline. The ideal warrior mastered both body and mind. Through Athena, this ideal gained divine form. One story tells of a gathering where the gods discussed warfare. The details differ among surviving traditions. Some versions may have been told only locally, yet the lesson remains consistent. Ares praised strength above all things. Athena disagreed. A single thoughtful decision, she suggested, could achieve what countless weapons could not. The debate continued long into the night. Torchlight danced across bronze armor. Outside, clouds drifted across starlit skies. Neither god fully convinced the other, and perhaps that was the point. The Greeks recognized both forces within human nature, passion and reason, impulse and restraint. Throughout mythology, Athena would repeatedly champion the second path. Meanwhile, her reputation spread, not among mortals yet, mostly among gods. She displayed remarkable skill in many arts: weaving, craftsmanship, architecture, navigation, military planning. Each talent reflected another aspect of civilization. This is important. Athena was never simply a goddess of war. She represented the knowledge required to build and sustain communities. Walls, ships, laws, temples, tools, ideas. The Greeks saw all these achievements as connected. Civilization depended upon wisdom, and wisdom belonged to Athena. One morning, as rosy light touched Olympus, another sign appeared. A great eagle circled above the mountain. 3 times it passed over Athena's head. Then it vanished into bright clouds. Some interpreted the event as a blessing from Zeus. Others saw a deeper meaning. Another interpretation suggests the eagle acknowledged Athena's future importance. No surviving source provides complete certainty. As often happens in mythology, mystery survives where facts do not. The uncertainty itself becomes part of the story. Days became seasons. Seasons became years. Though time flowed strangely among immortals, Athena's influence steadily grew. When disputes arose among gods, her counsel often proved valuable. When questions emerged, many sought her perspective, not because she demanded authority, because she earned respect. The Greeks admired this quality. True wisdom rarely announces itself loudly. It reveals itself through actions. Far below Olympus, the mortal world continued its rhythms. Fishing vessels crossed the Aegean Sea. Farmers tended olive groves beneath summer sunlight. Merchants traveled dusty roads connecting distant settlements. Sacred fires burned in humble shrines. The smell of bread drifted from village ovens. Children played beside fountains. Life moved forward. Yet unseen threads were already connecting these ordinary lives to Athena's future. Among countless unborn generations waited heroes, Perseus, Heracles, Odysseus, and many others. Their stories remained hidden beyond the horizon of time. But destiny was already moving, sometimes quietly, like waves forming far beyond sight. One night, Athena stood upon a terrace overlooking the world below. Stars filled the heavens. A cool breeze touched her bronze armor. The sea gleamed faintly in the distance. Some ancient poets imagined moments like this, moments when gods looked upon humanity and contemplated its future. Athena gazed toward the lands of Greece, toward mountains not yet climbed, cities not yet built, heroes not yet tested. A faint light appeared near the horizon, perhaps a star, perhaps something else. The goddess watched silently. The omen lingered briefly, then disappeared. No one knew its meaning, not yet. But somewhere in the generations ahead, a city awaited her protection, a city beside the sea, a city destined for greatness. And the first steps toward that future had already begun. The years passed gently across the mortal world. Below Olympus, sunlight moved over mountains and islands. Waves rolled against rocky shores. Villages grew beside streams and harbors. Smoke rose from cooking fires each evening before fading into the darkening sky. Athena watched. The goddess had become a familiar presence among the Olympians. Her wisdom was respected. Her counsel was often sought. Yet a question remained unanswered. Which people would become her people? Many gods possessed sacred places. Apollo had sanctuaries. Artemis had forests and shrines. Poseidon ruled vast seas stretching beyond sight. Athena's destiny, however, remained unfinished. Then an opportunity appeared. On a rugged peninsula overlooking the blue waters of the Aegean Sea stood a growing settlement. Its people lived among rocky hills and fertile valleys. Fishing boats crowded small harbors. Shepherds guided flocks across sunlit slopes. The settlement had no permanent divine protector, and several gods desired it. Ancient traditions tell the story in different ways. Some versions emphasize local rulers, others focus almost entirely upon the gods. Historians continue to debate how various regions preserve the tale. Yet one detail remains remarkably consistent. Athena and Poseidon became rivals. You can imagine the scene as the Greeks later pictured it. A bright morning dawns over the rocky heights. The sea sparkles beneath the sun. Warm winds carry the scent of salt water and wild thyme. People gather upon a sacred hill. The future of their city hangs in the balance. Poseidon arrived first. The mighty god of the sea appears in all his grandeur. His presence carries the sound of crashing waves. His beard seems touched by ocean foam. His eyes reflect the restless depths of the sea itself. The people look upon him with awe. How could they not? The sea governed much of Greek life. It provided food, trade, travel, opportunity, and danger. A god like Poseidon commanded immense respect. Soon Athena appears as well. She does not arrive with thunder. She does not shake the earth. Instead, she brings a quieter power, the power of thought, the power of creation, the power of patient wisdom. Her armor gleams beneath the sunlight. An owl circles high above. Many later storytellers viewed this detail as a favorable sign. Perhaps it truly belonged to the earliest versions. Perhaps it was added later. No one can know with certainty. The challenge begins. Each god must offer a gift. The people will choose which gift serves them best. Poseidon steps forward, raising his mighty trident. He strikes the earth. The impact echoes across the hilltop. Stone cracks, dust rises, a spring bursts from the ground. Some traditions describe fresh water. Others insist it was salt water. Another interpretation suggests the gift represented naval power itself. The differing versions reveal how myths evolved through centuries of retelling, whatever emerged from the earth. The crowd watches in amazement. The gift is dramatic, powerful, immediate, very much like Poseidon. Then Athena approaches. The goddess kneels beside the rocky ground. For a moment, everything becomes still. The wind softens. The sea quiets. Even the birds seem silent. Athena touches the earth. From the soil rises a slender tree. Its silver-green leaves shimmer beneath the sun. Its roots grip the rocky hillside. Its branches spread outward gracefully, the first olive tree. The people stare. At first glance, the gift appears humble. No thunder accompanies it. No great spectacle follows. Only a tree. Yet Athena asks them to look deeper. The olive tree offers food, oil, wood, light, medicine, trade, generations of prosperity. Its benefits grow steadily through time. This distinction mattered profoundly to Greek audiences. The myth presents two kinds of power, one dramatic and immediate, the other enduring and constructive. Athena's gift reflects long-term wisdom, the ability to build a future rather than merely dominate the present. The people deliberate. Priests perform rituals. Offerings burn upon sacred fires. The scent of incense drifts into warm air. As evening approaches, a decision is reached. Athena is chosen. The city becomes hers. Its people pledge devotion to the goddess. And in honor of their protector, the settlement receives a new name, Athens. Even today, the story remains inseparable from the city's identity. Archaeological discoveries reveal how deeply Athena's worship shaped Athenian culture. Her temples dominated sacred spaces. Her festivals united communities. Her image appeared throughout civic life. The myth helped explain not merely a city's origin, but its values. Wisdom, learning, craftsmanship, civic responsibility. These became central ideals. As twilight settles over the newly favored city, another strange event occurs. At least according to one lesser-known tradition. That night, several priests dream of an owl perched atop a young olive tree. Behind it rises a magnificent city of marble. Ships fill distant harbors. Crowds gather for festivals. Yet shadows also appear. War, fire, conflict. Then the vision fades. The meaning remains unclear. Ancient listeners would have recognized the pattern immediately. Blessings often arrive alongside warnings. Greatness frequently attracts danger. The dream suggests both. Athena receives her city, but no city escapes fate forever. High above, from the heights of Olympus, the gods observe the outcome. Poseidon does not celebrate. His disappointment lingers. Some stories portray him as angry. Others suggest reluctant acceptance. The relationship between Athena and Poseidon would remain complicated for generations of myth. Rivalry rarely vanishes completely among immortals. Yet, even disagreement contributed to Greek storytelling. The gods reflected forces present within the human world. Different values, different priorities, different visions of what mattered most. Athena's victory did not erase Poseidon's influence. Athens would always depend upon the sea. The tension between land and water continued. Wisdom and power remained intertwined. Years pass. The young olive tree grows. Its roots sink deeper into the earth. Its branches spread wider each season. Children are born beneath its shade. Merchants carry olive oil across distant waters. Farmers plant new groves throughout the countryside. The gift transforms lives. Many ancient Athenians believed the original sacred olive tree survived for centuries. Some traditions claim descendants of that tree endured even longer. Modern researchers cannot verify every detail. Yet surviving evidence indicates that the myth remained deeply meaningful. It connected ordinary people to divine history. To touch an olive branch was, in a sense, to touch Athena's blessing. One evening, as moonlight bathes the Acropolis in silver light, Athena stands upon the sacred hill. Below her, lanterns glow among homes. Voices drift upward from distant streets. The smell of olive oil and wood smoke fills the cool air. The city is still small. Its greatest days remain far away. Yet Athena sees possibilities hidden beyond the present moment. Temples, philosophers, artists, builders, heroes, generations not yet born. The future stretches before her like an unwritten scroll. And somewhere within that future waits another challenge. Not a city this time. A mortal woman, a loom, and a lesson that Greece would remember for centuries. The stars brighten overhead. The olive leaves whisper softly in the night breeze, and the story moves forward. The olive tree continued to grow, season after season. Its roots spread through the rocky soil of Attica. Warm summers passed beneath clear skies. Gentle winters brought cool rains from the sea. Around the sacred hill, the city of Athens slowly expanded. You can almost walk its streets. Narrow pathways wind between simple homes built from stone and clay. Merchants display pottery beneath woven awnings. Fishermen return from the coast carrying their daily catch. The scent of baking bread drifts through the air. Above everything rises the Acropolis, a high rocky plateau overlooking the surrounding land. To later generations, it would become one of the most famous sacred places in human history. But even now, in the early age of myth, it already possessed a special presence. The Greeks believed certain places carried divine significance. Mountain peaks, springs, sacred groves, ancient caves. The Acropolis was one such place. It stood between earth and sky. a natural meeting point between mortals and gods. Athena often gazed upon it with quiet satisfaction. The city had accepted her gift. In return, she offered guidance, not always through direct appearances. The gods rarely walked openly among ordinary people. More often, divine influence appeared through dreams, inspirations, symbols, and subtle moments of insight. A craftsman suddenly understands a difficult design. A leader discovers a wise solution. A sailor chooses the correct course before a storm. The Greeks often attributed such moments to Athena. Her wisdom flowed gently, rather than forcefully, like water finding its path downhill. As Athens grew, festivals in her honor became increasingly important. You arrive during one of these celebrations. The morning sun shines brightly upon white stone. Fresh garlands decorate shrines and doorways. Musicians fill the air with melodies played upon lyres and flutes. Children laugh among gathering crowds. The smell of roasted grain and burning incense drifts across the sacred hill. People come from villages throughout the region. Some bring offerings of olive oil. Others carry woven cloth. Farmers present baskets of fruit. Each gift expresses gratitude, not merely toward a goddess, toward the ideals she represents. Wisdom, skill, order, community. Ancient religion was deeply woven into daily life. The boundary between sacred and ordinary often seemed much thinner than it does today. Athena's presence could be felt everywhere, in workshops, in marketplaces, in homes, in public gatherings, even in military preparations. One reason the goddess remained so beloved was her versatility. Many gods governed specific aspects of existence. Athena touched nearly all of civilization itself: the construction of buildings, the making of tools, the solving of disputes, the planning of defenses, the education of children. All these activities reflected her influence. As the city prospered, stories about Athena multiplied. Some explained local customs, others preserved ancient memories. Still others offered lessons about human behavior. One evening, during a festival beneath a star-filled sky, a curious event occurred, at least according to later temple traditions. A group of priests gathered near the sacred olive tree. The night air felt cool against their skin. Lanterns flickered softly among the branches. Without warning, an owl landed upon the highest limb. The bird remained motionless, watching. Its eyes reflected torchlight. No sound disturbed the silence. Then, just before dawn, it flew away. The priests interpreted this as a favorable omen. Athena's sacred creature had appeared. The city remained under divine protection, yet not everyone agreed. Another tradition preserved a different interpretation. Some believed the owl arrived as a warning, a reminder that wisdom requires vigilance. Even prosperous cities can become careless. Even favored communities can lose their way. The uncertainty gave the story power. Many Greek myths leave room for reflection, rather than certainty. Athena herself seemed to embody this approach. She encouraged thought, rather than blind obedience. Questions, rather than simple answers. Meanwhile, beyond Athens, the wider Greek world continued changing. Ships crossed the Aegean. New settlements emerged upon distant islands. Trade routes expanded. Stories traveled alongside merchants and sailors. The fame of Athena spread. Visitors carried tales of her city back to their homelands. Some researchers believe these stories helped strengthen Athens' growing cultural influence. Religious traditions often shaped political and social identity. The connection between city and goddess became increasingly important. Yet greatness always carries risks, and Athens was no exception. One night, a dream troubled an elderly priestess. The dream survives only in fragments preserved by later storytellers. Whether it originated in ancient times or developed later remains uncertain. Still, the imagery is memorable. She dreams of the sacred olive tree standing beneath a brilliant sky. Its branches stretch farther than ever before. Birds gather among its leaves. People celebrate beneath its shade. Then dark clouds appear on the horizon. The tree remains standing, but the sky changes. The priestess awakens before dawn. Her heart is uneasy. She cannot explain why. The dream contains no direct threat, no clear prophecy, only a feeling, a sense that every blessing carries responsibility. The story spread quietly through the city. Some ignored it, others discussed it thoughtfully. What future awaited Athens, no one knew, not even those closest to Athena. The Greeks understood that fate revealed itself gradually, like distant mountains emerging through morning mist. As years passed, construction upon the Acropolis continued. Sacred spaces expanded. Shrines became more elaborate. Offerings accumulated. The hill grew increasingly beautiful. Imagine standing there at sunset, The sky glows with gold and crimson light. Sea breezes rise from distant shores. Marble surfaces catch the fading sun far below. Lamps begin appearing throughout the city. The world feels peaceful, enduring, almost eternal. Yet mythology constantly reminds us that nothing remains unchanged forever. Not kingdoms, not cities, not even heroes. Athena understood this truth well. Perhaps that is why she valued wisdom so highly. Strength fades, beauty changes, fortunes rise and fall. But wisdom helps people navigate uncertainty. It prepares them for whatever destiny brings. Soon another story would reveal this lesson more dramatically. Not through kings, not through armies, but through a woman whose skill astonished everyone who saw it. Her name was Arachne. She lived far from Olympus, far from divine halls. Yet her choices would become one of the most famous warnings in Greek mythology. And as the sacred fires burned quietly upon the Acropolis, the first threads of that story were already being woven. Somewhere beyond the city, somewhere beneath the same stars, a young woman sat before a loom, and destiny watched patiently beside her. Far from the sacred heights of Athens, beyond olive groves and winding roads, there stood a small town where the sound of looms filled the air from morning until evening. The town itself was unremarkable. Whitewashed homes stood beside dusty paths. Goats wandered between stone walls. Smoke rose gently from hearth fires. Yet within one modest workshop lived a young woman whose skill would become legendary. Her name was Arachne. As dawnlight spilled across the countryside, she often sat before her loom long before others awakened. You can picture the scene. The room smells faintly of wool and olive oil. Soft morning sunlight enters through narrow windows. Wooden beams creak quietly overhead. Outside, birds greet the day. Inside, only the steady rhythm of weaving can be heard. Thread passes through thread. Pattern emerges from patience. Color becomes story. Arachne possessed extraordinary talent. People traveled long distances simply to watch her work. Farmers paused during journeys. Merchants delayed their departures. Young apprentices gathered near her workshop door. They stood silently as cloth transformed beneath her hands. The admiration seemed endless. Some visitors believed no mortal could create such beauty. Others whispered that Athena herself must have taught the young woman. This was not an insult. It was praise. Athena was widely honored as patron of weaving, craftsmanship, and skilled labor. To compare someone with the goddess suggested remarkable excellence. Most artisans would have felt honored. Arachne did not. At first, perhaps she merely accepted the compliments. Then she began to believe them. Eventually, she demanded them. The transformation happened slowly. Pride rarely arrives all at once. It grows quietly, like a vine climbing a wall. Each compliment fed it. Each expression of admiration strengthened it. Soon Arachne no longer accepted comparisons to Athena. She rejected them. "I am the better weaver," she reportedly claimed. Whether those exact words were ever spoken remains uncertain. Different versions of the myth preserve different conversations, yet all agree on the central idea. Arachne believed her talent surpassed the goddess herself. The claim spread quickly. Stories travel rapidly in every age, especially stories involving arrogance, especially stories involving gods. Across Greece, listeners repeated the tale. Some laughed, some disapproved, some waited nervously. The gods were known for many things. Patience was not always among them. One afternoon, as sunlight warmed the town square, an old woman appeared near Arachne's workshop. At least this is how the most famous version tells the story. The stranger moved slowly. A walking stick supported her weight. Silver hair framed a weathered face. She seemed ordinary, easy to overlook. The old woman approached Arachne and spoke gently. She advised caution. Talent was a blessing. Pride was dangerous. One should respect the gods. One should honor Athena. The warning was simple, reasonable, perhaps even kind. But Arachne refused to listen. She dismissed the stranger. Some versions say she mocked her. Others soften the exchange slightly. Yet every tradition reaches the same conclusion. Arachne would not retreat. She openly challenged Athena to a contest. The old woman straightened. The disguise vanished. Suddenly the room blazed with divine radiance. Light filled every corner. The air itself seemed charged with power. Before the stunned crowd stood Athena. The goddess appeared in all her majesty. Her gray eyes shone. Her presence commanded attention, even now, thousands of years later. The image remains vivid. A mortal artisan, standing before the patron goddess of her craft. A challenge accepted. Outside, Clouds gathered unexpectedly. A cool wind stirred the streets. Some later storytellers described these changes as omens. Others believed they symbolized the tension filling the moment. Either way, anticipation spread quickly. The contest would begin. 2 looms were prepared. The room grew quiet. Spectators gathered. No one wished to miss what happened next. Athena began first. Her hands moved with effortless precision. Threads crossed and intertwined. Images slowly emerged within the fabric. The goddess wove scenes, celebrating divine order, the power of Olympus, the consequences faced by mortals who disrespected the gods. Each figure appeared detailed and alive. Every color seemed perfectly chosen. The cloth itself shimmered. Ancient listeners likely understood the symbolism immediately. Athena's tapestry expressed harmony between divine authority and mortal responsibility. The message was clear. Respect sustains order. Humility preserves balance. Then Arachne began her own work. The room remained silent except for the soft sounds of weaving. Thread moved swiftly through her fingers. Pattern followed pattern. Color followed color. When her tapestry finally became visible, spectators stared in astonishment. The work was magnificent. Even Athena could not deny it. The details were flawless. The craftsmanship extraordinary. Yet the subject matter shocked everyone present. Instead of praising the gods, Arachne depicted their flaws, their mistakes, their deceptions. Stories in which divine beings behaved selfishly or unjustly. The scenes were skillfully executed, perhaps too skillfully. The challenge struck deeper than simple rivalry. Arachne had questioned the moral authority of Olympus itself. This element of the myth has fascinated scholars for centuries. Some researchers believe the story reflects ancient tensions surrounding power and criticism. Others see a meditation on artistic freedom. Another interpretation suggests the myth explores the limits of truth when confronting authority. No single explanation fully resolves the mystery, and perhaps it was never meant to. The Greeks often allowed myths to contain multiple meanings simultaneously. When the weaving ended, everyone understood the outcome. Arachne had produced remarkable work, perhaps equal to Athena's, perhaps even superior in technical execution. The goddess saw it too, for a moment. Silence filled the workshop. The scent of wool lingered in the air. Dust floated through shafts of afternoon sunlight. No one moved. No one spoke. What happened next varies between traditions. Some versions emphasize Athena's anger. Others portray disappointment. A few suggest sorrow. Whatever emotion dominated the moment, the result remained tragic. Athena destroyed the tapestry. Arachne's triumph vanished. The young weaver's confidence shattered. The consequences unfolded swiftly. In the most familiar version, Athena transformed Arachne into a spider. The change reflected both punishment and permanence. If Arachne loved weaving above all else, she would continue weaving forever, thread after thread, generation after generation. The image endured in Greek memory. A spider spinning its web became a reminder. Skill alone is not enough. Talent alone is not enough. Wisdom must accompany achievement. As evening settled over the town, shadows lengthened across empty streets. The workshop stood quiet. The contest had ended, yet its lesson would survive for centuries. Travelers carried the story from village to village. Parents told it beside hearth fires. Priests discussed it within temple courtyards. And somewhere far away, upon the Acropolis of Athens, Athena reflected upon what had occurred. For even gods sometimes faced difficult questions. Questions without simple answers. Questions that lingered long after judgment had been passed. The loom had fallen silent, but the echoes of its lesson were only beginning. The story of Arachne did not end within the walls of her workshop. Like threads carried by the wind, it spread across the Greek world. Sailors repeated the tale beside harbor fires. Merchants shared it along dusty roads. Travelers told different versions beneath moonlit skies. Each retelling added something new. Each listener found a different meaning. That is the nature of myth. It changes slightly with every voice, yet somehow remains the same story. As the years passed, the image of the weaver and the goddess became woven into the memory of Greece itself. You can imagine an evening in a coastal village. The sea is calm. Fishing boats rest against wooden docks. Lanterns glow softly along the waterfront. The scent of salt and smoke drifts through cool night air. Children sit beside elders listening to stories. Above them, stars shimmer across the dark heavens. Someone begins speaking about Arachne. The listeners lean closer. Even those who know the tale already wish to hear it again. But the storyteller does not present a simple lesson. Instead, questions emerge. Was Arachne punished because she was arrogant? Or because she spoke uncomfortable truths? Did Athena act out of anger or out of responsibility? No one agrees completely, and perhaps they never will. This uncertainty helped the myth survive. Many ancient stories endure because they resist easy answers. Athena herself seemed connected to such mysteries. She was not a goddess of blind certainty. She represented careful judgment, thoughtful reflection, the difficult search for wisdom. Meanwhile, Athens continued to prosper beneath her protection. The sacred olive tree still stood upon the Acropolis. Its silver leaves whispered whenever sea breezes crossed the hill. Priests maintained shrines. Citizens celebrated festivals. Craftsmen honored Athena before beginning important work. The city and the goddess grew increasingly intertwined. Yet even during times of prosperity, signs and omens continued to appear. The Greeks paid close attention to such things. Birds, dreams, storms, unexpected events. All might contain messages from the divine world. One autumn evening, a curious report spread among temple attendants. Several owls had gathered near the sacred olive tree. This alone was unusual. Athena's sacred birds often appeared singly, but now many perched together among the branches. The moon illuminated their pale feathers. The birds remained silent, watching, waiting. Then, just before dawn, they vanished. Some priests interpreted the sight as a blessing. Others felt uncertain. Why so many owls? Why that particular night? No clear answer emerged. The mystery lingered. Ancient audiences appreciated such moments. Not every omen required immediate explanation. Sometimes signs existed simply to remind people that unseen forces remained at work. High above, upon Olympus, Athena observed the mortal world. The goddess rarely interfered directly. Instead, she watched patterns unfold. Cities rose, families prospered, wars erupted, generations passed. Wisdom required patience, and patience allowed perspective. One evening, Athena walked alone through the gardens of Olympus. Moonlight silvered the leaves of immortal trees. Clear streams reflected the stars. The air smelled faintly of blooming flowers that never faded. The scene felt peaceful, yet something troubled her thoughts. Perhaps it was memory, perhaps prophecy. Ancient poets often imagined gods reflecting upon future events. Though immortal, they were not all-knowing. They glimpsed possibilities, not certainties. Athena understood that many destinies were already taking shape among mortals. Far below, children were being born. Most would live ordinary lives. Some would become kings. A few would become legends. The threads of fate were gathering. One thread, in particular, had begun to shine more brightly. It belonged to a family connected to an old prophecy, a prophecy that had not yet reached its conclusion. The story began generations earlier. A king named Perseus ruled the city of Argos. His kingdom prospered. His walls stood strong. His treasury was full. Yet one fear haunted him. He had no son, only a daughter. Her name was Danae. At first, this seemed merely a disappointment. Then came the prophecy. Ancient traditions preserve several versions of the warning. The details differ slightly, but the message remains unchanged. Perseus would one day die at the hands of his daughter's son. The prediction struck him like a thunderbolt. Again, Greek mythology returns to a familiar theme. Fear of destiny often becomes the very force that fulfills it. The pattern appeared with Uranus, with Cronus, with Zeus. Now it appeared again among mortals. Perseus reacted as many rulers in myth do, not with wisdom, with fear. Fear can cloud judgment, even among kings. The old warning spread quietly through Argos. People whispered about it in marketplaces. Priests discussed it within temple courtyards. Servants exchanged rumors beside cooking fires. What would the king do? Could fate be avoided? No one knew. Yet everyone understood the danger. Prophecies rarely entered stories without purpose. Back in Athens, another festival approached. Crowds gathered once more upon the Acropolis. Musicians played beneath bright skies. Offerings accumulated beside sacred altars. The smell of incense mingled with warm sea air. Life seemed joyful, stable, secure. But beneath the celebrations flowed deeper currents. The Greeks often viewed existence this way. Visible events occupied the surface. Fate moved beneath. Invisible, but powerful. Athena understood this truth better than most. As goddess of wisdom, she recognized patterns hidden from ordinary sight. And now a pattern was emerging. The prophecy surrounding Perseus, the growing thread of destiny. The mysterious future hero not yet born. Somewhere, far from Athens, events were beginning to move. Slowly, quietly, Inevitably, the same moon that shone above the Acropolis also illuminated the palace of Argos. The same stars watched over both places, and beneath those stars, destiny prepared its next step. Athena stood upon a terrace overlooking the mortal world. A cool wind stirred her cloak. The night seemed unusually still. Then an owl landed beside her. The bird remained silent. Its golden eyes reflected distant starlight. For a moment, goddess and owl gazed toward the world below, toward Argos, toward prophecy, toward a child who did not yet exist. A hero whose life would one day become inseparable from Athena's own story. The owl spread its wings, then vanished into the darkness. The sign was brief, its meaning uncertain, but the future had begun to stir, and somewhere beyond the horizon of fate, Perseus awaited his first breath. The moon shone brightly over Argos. Silver light washed across palace walls and quiet courtyards. Cypress trees cast long shadows over stone pathways. Somewhere in the distance, a fountain murmured softly through the night. Yet King Acrisius could not sleep. The prophecy haunted him. Again and again, he remembered the warning. One day, his daughter's son would cause his death. The prediction seemed impossible. Danae was unmarried. No child existed. No threat stood before him. And still the fear remained. Ancient Greek audiences understood this feeling well. Many myths explore the danger of allowing fear to govern decisions. Acrisius faced a choice: trust fate or fight it. He chose the second path. As dawn painted the eastern sky with pale gold, workers began constructing a strange prison, not beneath the earth, not behind city walls, a chamber of bronze. Some traditions describe it as a tower, others as an underground room lined with metal. Historians continued to debate which version appeared first. The exact form matters less than the purpose. Acrisius intended to isolate Danae completely. If no man could reach her, no child could be born. The logic seemed simple, human, and deeply flawed. You can imagine Danae standing within her bronze chamber. The metal walls feel cool beneath her fingertips. Only narrow openings admit sunlight. Outside, the sounds of ordinary life drift faintly inward. Bird song, distant voices, footsteps echoing across stone. She is not mistreated, yet she is imprisoned, a prisoner of another person's fear. The years pass slowly. Seasons change. Summer heat warms the bronze walls. Winter rains drum softly overhead. The world continues beyond her reach. Then one evening, something extraordinary happens. Darkness settles across the land. Stars emerge one by one. The air feels calm, almost unnaturally calm. Far above, upon Olympus, Zeus gazes toward Argos. Different storytellers offered different explanations for what followed. Some emphasize divine desire. Others focus upon destiny itself. The surviving traditions do not speak with one voice. Yet they agree that fate was moving, and no bronze chamber could stop it. As Danae sits alone beneath moonlight, a strange radiance appears. At first it resembles a distant glow. Then it grows brighter, golden, shimmering, almost fluid. The light enters the chamber like a stream of sunlight transformed into liquid gold. The image became one of the most famous in Greek mythology. For generations, poets described the moment with wonder. Painters later attempted to capture it upon pottery and walls. The symbolism remains mysterious. What exactly did ancient audiences imagine? Scholars remain divided. Some interpret the golden rain literally within the logic of myth. Others view it symbolically. The uncertainty survives, and perhaps that mystery contributes to the story's enduring power. Whatever form the miracle took, its result became clear. Danae conceived a child destined to change the course of many lives. Months later, beneath another starlit sky, the child was born. His name was Perseus. You can almost hear the sounds of that quiet night. The soft cry of an infant, the whisper of wind outside, the distant rustle of trees. A new life entering the world. Danae held her son close. For a brief time, joy overcame fear. Yet happiness in mythology often proves fragile. Eventually, the truth reached Acrisius. The king descended into despair. The prophecy had survived. Despite every precaution, despite every sacrifice, despite every attempt to control destiny, the child existed. And with him came the future. Some traditions suggest Acrisius considered killing them both. Others portray him as reluctant. Whatever his emotions, he hesitated. To kill family members openly might anger the gods. So he sought another solution, one that allowed fate and the sea to decide. Workers prepared a large wooden chest. The rough boards smelled strongly of fresh-cut timber. Iron fittings secured the lid. Inside, Danae and her young son were placed together. The image is heartbreaking. A mother, an infant, a wooden chest, an endless sea. Ancient listeners often felt deep sympathy during this moment. The story shifts away from royal power and toward human vulnerability. The waves care little for prophecies. The sea cares little for kings. As dawn approached, the chest was carried to the shore. The sky glowed softly above the horizon. Seabirds circled overhead. Gentle waves rolled against rocks. For a moment, everything seemed strangely peaceful. Then the chest was pushed into the water. Danae drifted away from Argos, away from certainty, away from home. The sea stretched endlessly in every direction. Inside the chest, darkness surrounded mother and child. The smell of salt filled the air. Wood creaked with each wave. Outside, the ocean carried them wherever fate desired, somewhere high above. Athena watched. She did not intervene directly, not yet, but the future hero had entered her awareness. The Greeks often portrayed Athena as especially attentive to exceptional mortals, not because they were powerful, because they possessed potential. Wisdom recognized possibility before others could see it. Days passed upon the sea. The chest rose and fell with the waves. Sometimes sunlight warmed the wood. Sometimes rain struck the lid. At night, stars crossed silently overhead. Ancient sailors often believed the heavens guided journeys. Constellations became companions during long voyages. And perhaps, in the imagination of Greek storytellers, those same stars watched over Perseus. At last land appeared, a small island emerging from the sea. Rocky shores, green hills, sheltered coves, the island of Cerberus. There, according to the myth, a fisherman named Dictys discovered the drifting chest. You can picture him standing upon the shore. The morning air smells of salt and seaweed. Waves break gently against the rocks. A strange object floats toward land. Curious, he approaches. Soon he hears a child's cry from within. The fisherman opens the chest. Sunlight floods the darkness. Fresh air rushes inside. Danae shields her eyes. The ordeal has ended. Mother and child are saved. The Greeks loved such moments. After fear comes relief. After darkness comes light. Yet destiny never pauses for long. Perseus is safe, but he remains connected to prophecy, connected to gods, connected to adventures still far beyond the horizon. As evening settles over Cerberus, Danae gazes toward the sea. The sky glows with fading colors. Her son sleeps peacefully nearby. The waves whisper against the shore. For now, there is calm. For now, there is safety. Yet somewhere in the distance, another sign appears. A bright star burns unusually clear above the horizon. Several islanders notice it. Some believe it is merely a star. Others wonder if it carries meaning. No answer comes, only silence, and the quiet promise that the child beneath the stars is destined for greatness. Perseus grew beside the sea. The island of Cerberus was small compared to the great kingdoms of Greece. Yet it possessed its own quiet beauty. Rocky hills overlooked sparkling waters. Fishing boats drifted across sheltered bays. Olive trees clung stubbornly to sunlit slopes. You can imagine the rhythm of life there. Morning arrives with the cries of seabirds. Nets are cast into clear waters. Children run along narrow paths between whitewashed homes. The scent of salt, pine, and wood smoke mingles in the air. For Danae, the island became a refuge. For Perseus, it became a home. The fisherman Dictys treated them kindly. Ancient traditions consistently portray him as generous and honorable. His modest dwelling offered safety after the terror of the sea. Many Greek listeners would have admired such a figure. Heroes often emerge from humble beginnings. Kindness frequently proves more important than wealth. Years passed. The child became a boy. The boy became a young man. Perseus grew strong, yet strength alone did not define him. Stories describe him as courageous, respectful, and thoughtful, qualities that would later attract Athena's attention far above. The goddess continued to observe. Athena rarely chose heroes at random. She valued intelligence, patience, judgment, the same virtues she represented herself. Perseus possessed these qualities, though he did not yet understand how important they would become. One evening, as the sun sank into the western sea, a curious event occurred. Perseus stood alone upon a cliff overlooking the water. Below, waves broke gently against black rocks. The air felt cool. The horizon glowed with fading gold. Suddenly an owl appeared. The bird landed nearby and remained unusually still. Its pale feathers caught the last light of day. Its eyes seemed almost watchful. The encounter lasted only moments. Then the owl took flight and disappeared into the gathering dusk. Perseus thought little of it, but Greek audiences would have recognized the symbol immediately. The sacred bird of Athena had appeared. Whether it was truly sent by the goddess remained uncertain. Some ancient storytellers believed so. Others left the question unanswered. The mystery itself became part of the tale. As Perseus matured, trouble approached from an unexpected direction. The ruler of Seriphos was King Polydectes, unlike Dictys, his brother. Polydectes was ambitious, proud, and increasingly interested in Danae. The king desired her affection. Danae did not return those feelings. This created a problem, as long as Perseus remained nearby. His mother was protected. The young man had grown capable and determined. Polydectes recognized this, and slowly a dangerous idea formed. The Greeks often portrayed villains not as monsters, but as ordinary people corrupted by selfish desires. Polydectes fit this pattern well. He was not a giant, not a sorcerer, not a creature of darkness. He was simply willing to manipulate others to achieve his goals. One day he announced a grand feast. Guests arrived from across the island. Tables overflowed with food. Torches illuminated the gathering hall. The smell of roasted meat and fresh bread filled the warm evening air. Music echoed from lyres and flutes. Perseus attended along with many others. At first everything seemed ordinary. Then Polydectes introduced a proposal. He claimed to be seeking a bride as a wedding gift. Each guest would present a horse. Many nodded in agreement. Horses represented wealth and status. The request seemed reasonable, yet Perseus possessed no horse. Embarrassed, he offered something else, perhaps anything the king desired. Different versions of the myth preserve slightly different wording, but the result remains the same. Polydectes seized the opportunity immediately. If Perseus wished to prove himself, the king declared, he could bring back the head of Medusa. The hall fell silent, even among legendary creatures. Medusa inspired fear. Her name was known throughout Greece. The Gorgon, the monster whose gaze turned living beings into stone. The challenge sounded impossible. That was precisely the point. Polydectes expected Perseus to fail, perhaps to die. Either outcome would remove an obstacle. Yet pride and honor trapped the young hero. He could not easily withdraw. The task had been accepted. That night, long after the feast ended, Perseus walked alone beside the sea. Moonlight shimmered across the waves. A cool breeze stirred the water. Far offshore, dark clouds gathered near the horizon. The future suddenly felt uncertain. Ancient listeners would have understood his fear. Heroes are often remembered for courage, but courage matters only when fear exists. Without danger, bravery loses meaning. Perseus knew the stories. Everyone did. Medusa dwelled far away in a remote and terrifying place. Her appearance alone inspired dread. Snakes writhed where hair should have been. Her eyes carried deadly power. No warrior who looked directly at her survived. Yet another mystery surrounded Medusa. Not all traditions described her in the same way. Some ancient sources portray her as a monster from birth. Others tell a more tragic story. According to that version, Medusa was once beautiful. A mortal woman connected to Athena's temple. Something terrible occurred. Different storytellers offer different explanations. Some place blame upon Poseidon. Others emphasize divine punishment. The surviving traditions do not agree completely. Historians continue debating how these versions developed. The uncertainty remains, and perhaps it always will. What matters for Perseus is simpler. Whatever Medusa once was, she had become a deadly threat. The mission seemed hopeless. As midnight approached, Perseus finally slept. Then came a dream. The dream would later become one of the most important signs in his journey. He sees a vast plain beneath a star-filled sky. Countless stone statues stand motionless in the darkness. Warriors, travelers, kings, all frozen forever. At the center rises a shining shield, bright as moonlight, smooth as still water. An owl lands upon its surface. Then the dream ends. Perseus awakens before dawn. His heart is racing. The meaning remains unclear, yet the image stays with him. The Greeks believed dreams could carry divine messages. Not every dream came from the gods, but some did. The challenge now looming before Perseus demanded guidance, and guidance was already approaching. Far above, Athena had been watching. The prophecy surrounding Perseus continued unfolding. The child carried across the sea had reached the threshold of destiny. Ahead lay monsters, magic, danger, and wisdom. For the greatest weapon Perseus would receive would not be a sword. It would be understanding. And somewhere beyond the edge of the known world, beneath dark skies and ancient curses, Medusa waited. Before dawn, Perseus stood alone beside the sea. The island still slept. Fishing boats rocked gently within the harbor. Lanterns flickered faintly along the shore. The cool air carried the scent of salt and wet stone. Above him, countless stars slowly faded before the coming sunrise. Yet his thoughts remained fixed upon the dream, the field of statues, the owl, the shining shield. The images lingered with unusual clarity. Ancient Greeks often believed that truly important dreams left a lasting impression upon the soul. Ordinary dreams faded quickly. Divine dreams remained. Perseus could not know whether his vision came from a god, but he felt its significance. The challenge before him seemed impossible. Somewhere beyond the known lands dwelled Medusa, a creature feared by kings and warriors alike. Countless stories surrounded her. Some claimed entire armies had vanished while seeking her. Others insisted she lived beyond the edge of the world itself. The truth remained uncertain, as often happened in mythology. Fear had enlarged the legend, yet even exaggerated stories usually contained a seed of reality. Medusa was dangerous, very dangerous. That much everyone agreed upon, as sunlight touched the sea. Perseus prepared for departure. Danae watched quietly. A mother often recognizes danger before others do. Perhaps she sensed how much depended upon this journey. Perhaps she remembered the prophecy that had followed her son since birth. No surviving tradition records every word exchanged between them. The silence itself feels meaningful. Sometimes the most important farewells require few words. By midday, Perseus had begun his quest. The sea stretched endlessly around him. Waves sparkled beneath bright sunlight. Seabirds glided above the water. Ahead waited uncertainty. Far above, Athena observed. The goddess had watched Perseus since childhood. Now the time had come to act. Not by fighting the hero's battles, not by removing every obstacle. Athena rarely helped in that way. Instead, she offered something more valuable: guidance, wisdom. The Greeks deeply admired this idea. True assistance does not eliminate challenges. It prepares someone to face them one evening after many days of travel. Perseus reached a lonely coastline. Jagged cliffs rose above dark waters. Sea winds swept across the rocks. The sky glowed with fading crimson light. As night approached, an unfamiliar figure appeared. Some traditions describe the encounter differently. Certain storytellers combine events. Others separate them. Yet Athena's involvement remains constant. The goddess revealed herself to Perseus, not with overwhelming spectacle, not with thunder. Her presence carried a quieter authority. You can imagine the scene. Moonlight reflects across the sea. The sound of waves echoes below. Athena stands upon the cliff. Her armor gleams softly beneath the stars. An owl circles once overhead before vanishing into darkness. Perseus immediately understands that he stands before a goddess. Yet Athena's words bring reassurance rather than fear. The quest is difficult, she explains, but not impossible. Every challenge contains a solution. Every danger possesses a weakness. The lesson reflects one of Athena's central themes. Problems are rarely overcome through force alone. Understanding matters. Observation matters. Thought matters. The goddess then directs Perseus toward another stage of his journey. Before he can face Medusa, he must find certain beings known as the Graeae. The Graeae were strange creatures, ancient sisters, older than many monsters. Some stories describe them as gray-haired from birth. Others portray them as ancient beyond imagination. Most versions agree upon one memorable detail. The three sisters shared a single eye and a single tooth. The image fascinated generations of listeners. Scholars continue debating its symbolic meaning. Perhaps it represented shared knowledge, perhaps declining wisdom, perhaps something else entirely. No interpretation commands universal agreement. The mystery survives. Perseus continued onward. The landscape grew increasingly remote. Mountains rose beneath stormy skies. Cold winds swept through barren valleys. Few travelers ventured so far. The world felt older here, wild, untamed, as though ordinary civilization had been left behind. Eventually, he found the Graeae. The sisters sat among weathered rocks beneath a gray sky. The sea crashed against distant cliffs. Mist drifted across the landscape. The creatures passed their single eye back and forth between them. Each used it briefly before handing it onward. The scene seemed strange, almost unsettling. Yet Athena's earlier guidance had prepared Perseus. The goddess had not given him a weapon. She had given him an idea. Timing, observation, patience, as the sisters exchanged the eye once more. Perseus acted. Swiftly, he seized it. The Graeae cried out in surprise. Without their eye, they could see nothing. Without sight, their power vanished. The moment reveals something important. Perseus succeeds not through strength, not through violence, but through cleverness. Athena's influence is already visible. Ancient audiences would have recognized the lesson immediately. Wisdom often achieves what force cannot. The sisters pleaded for the eye's return. Perseus agreed, but only after receiving information. He needed directions, hidden knowledge, guidance toward the magical items required for his quest. Eventually, the Graeae relented. The bargain was made. The path forward revealed, another mystery solved. Yet many remained. The road ahead led toward powerful treasures, winged sandals, a special pouch, a helmet capable of granting invisibility, gifts connected to gods and ancient powers. Without them, Medusa could never be defeated. As Perseus traveled onward, Athena continued watching from afar. The hero was changing. Each challenge sharpened his judgment. Each decision strengthened his confidence. The process mirrors a recurring Greek belief. Great heroes are not born complete. They become who they are through trials. The night after meeting the Graeae, Perseus slept beneath open skies. The stars seemed unusually bright. A cool wind moved through nearby grasses. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called once. Then silence returned. Another dream visited him. This time the vision was clearer. The shining shield from before appeared once more. Moonlight reflected across its polished surface. Yet now Perseus understood something new. The shield was not merely protection. It was a mirror, a way of seeing danger without looking directly at it. When he awoke, dawn had barely touched the horizon. The dream remained vivid. Important, the Greeks often portrayed Athena through symbols of sight and understanding. To perceive correctly is to survive. To understand clearly is to prevail. Soon the goddess would place that lesson directly into Perseus's hands. For Medusa waited ahead, beyond mountains, beyond oceans, beyond the boundaries of ordinary fear. And when the hero finally reached her shadowed realm, brute strength would prove useless. Only wisdom would save him. Only Athena's gift would allow him to look without seeing. And in that paradox rested the fate of the quest. The path led farther from the familiar world. Behind Perseus lay harbors, villages, and the ordinary rhythms of human life. Ahead stretched landscapes touched by myth. Mountains rose beneath restless clouds. Lonely valleys disappeared into mist. Ancient winds swept across forgotten places. The hero continued onward. Each step carried him deeper into destiny. The information gained from the Graeae had proven valuable. Following their directions, Perseus eventually reached the hidden beings known as the nymphs. The Greeks often imagined such figures dwelling in remote and beautiful places. Sacred springs, forest clearings, mountain caves, places where nature itself seemed alive. You can picture the sanctuary where Perseus arrived. A clear stream flows over smooth stones. Silver water reflects patches of sunlight through overhanging branches. Wildflowers bloom beside moss-covered rocks. The air smells fresh and cool. Birdsong drifts through the trees. After so much travel, the place feels almost dreamlike. There the nymphs awaited him. Their exact nature differs between traditions. Some stories emphasize their connection to the earth. Others link them to hidden waters and sacred groves. Whatever their origin, they possessed treasures essential to Perseus's quest. The first gift was a pair of winged sandals, light and graceful, capable of carrying their wearer across great distances. The second was a special pouch, simple in appearance, yet powerful enough to hold the terrible head of Medusa safely. The third gift was perhaps the strangest, a helmet belonging to Hades himself. When worn, it rendered its bearer invisible. Ancient listeners must have found the collection fascinating. Each object represented a different form of power, movement, protection, concealment. None relied upon brute force. Again, Athena's influence can be felt. Success would depend upon preparation rather than strength alone. As Perseus accepted the gifts, another sign appeared. At least some versions of the myth preserve such a detail. A sudden breeze stirred the leaves above the stream. The water rippled unexpectedly. Then an owl landed upon a nearby branch. Its golden eyes remained fixed upon the hero. For several moments, neither bird nor man moved. Then the owl spread its wings and vanished. No words accompanied the omen. None were necessary. Perseus understood. Athena was watching. Soon afterward, the goddess herself appeared. The meeting became one of the defining moments of the entire legend. The sky above the grove glowed with late afternoon light. Shadows lengthened among the trees. The stream continued its quiet song. Athena approached carrying a remarkable gift, a shield, but not an ordinary shield. Its surface shone like polished silver, smooth, perfect, reflective as still water beneath moonlight. Immediately Perseus remembered his dreams, the field of stone figures, the owl, the shining mirror. At last the meaning became clear. Athena explained the danger. Medusa's gaze turned living creatures into stone. To look directly at her was death. The shield would allow him to see her reflection instead. This was the solution. Not greater strength, not greater speed, a different way of seeing. The symbolism runs deep. Ancient Greeks often associated wisdom with perspective. Problems become solvable when viewed correctly. Athena's shield embodied this principle beautifully. Perseus accepted the gift. The polished surface reflected the surrounding forest, trees, sky, water, his own face. Everything appeared clear, yet slightly removed, as though reality itself had become a puzzle requiring interpretation. The hero's final preparations were complete. Now only Medusa remained. The journey toward her lair carried him beyond lands known to most mortals. Winged sandals lifted him into the sky. Below stretched seas glowing beneath sunlight. White waves traced patterns across deep blue waters. Islands appeared and disappeared beneath drifting clouds. The world seemed vast, endless, beautiful, flying above the sea. Perseus experienced a perspective few humans ever knew. Mountains became distant shapes. Ships resembled tiny insects crossing glittering water. Cities vanished into the landscape. The experience likely held symbolic meaning for ancient audiences. Heroes often gain broader vision during their journeys, literally and metaphorically. Distance reveals patterns invisible from the ground. Days passed. The scenery gradually changed. The lands below grew increasingly barren. Vegetation became sparse. Rock replaced fertile soil. The atmosphere felt older, more dangerous. Eventually, Perseus entered regions associated with the far edges of the mythical world. Ancient Greeks imagined such places as mysterious and uncertain, not merely distant geographically, distant spiritually. Locations where ordinary rules weakened, where monsters might exist, where forgotten powers lingered. As twilight approached one evening, Perseus saw something strange below. Stone figures, hundreds of them, scattered across a desolate plain. The sight chilled him, even from above. Their forms seemed unmistakably human. Warriors frozen mid-stride, travelers reaching forward, hunters clutching weapons, all transformed into stone. The dream had spoken true. Medusa's victims. The realization deepened the danger. These were not stories, not exaggerations, not legends distorted by fear. Real people had come here and failed. The setting sun cast long shadows across the statues. For a moment, the entire landscape appeared suspended between life and death. Perseus descended cautiously. A cold wind moved across the plain. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. Silence ruled everything. The stillness itself felt unnatural. Ancient storytellers often used silence to signal the presence of supernatural forces. Here, the technique worked perfectly. The absence of sound became a warning. Nearby stood broken weapons, weathered shields, fragments of forgotten armor, the remains of earlier quests, earlier hopes. The hero moved carefully through the stone figures. Some faces still displayed fear, others surprise. A few appeared almost peaceful. The details disturbed him. Each statue represented a story unfinished, a life interrupted. Another mystery emerged as he traveled deeper. Not all ancient accounts describe Medusa identically. Some portray her as purely monstrous. Others preserve hints of tragedy, a woman transformed, a victim before becoming a threat. The conflicting traditions create uncertainty. Even now, scholars debate which elements belong to the oldest versions. The ambiguity matters, because mythology often refuses simple categories. Monster, victim, hero, villain. Such labels rarely tell the entire story. Night approached. The first stars appeared overhead. Perseus found shelter among dark rocks overlooking the cursed landscape. Tomorrow he would enter Medusa's domain. Tomorrow Athena's wisdom would face its greatest test. The hero slept lightly, and during the night another dream arrived. He sees the sacred olive tree standing upon the Acropolis. Its silver leaves shimmer beneath moonlight. An owl rests among the branches. Then the tree's reflection appears upon Athena's shield. Two images, one real, one reflected, both true. When Perseus awakens before dawn, the lesson remains. Sometimes direct sight deceives. Sometimes reflection reveals reality more clearly. The dream offers no further explanation, only a quiet certainty. The time has come. Medusa waits beyond the darkness, and above the silent plain, the stars slowly fade before the coming day. Dawn arrives slowly across the desolate plain. A pale light spread over the countless stone figures scattered across the landscape. Long shadows stretched between weathered rocks. The air felt cold and still. Nothing moved. Not a bird, not an animal, not even a blade of grass stirred in the wind. The silence remained complete. You can imagine Perseus standing among the statues as the first sunlight touched their stone faces. Warriors, hunters, travelers, each one had come seeking glory. Each one had failed. The sight served as a warning more powerful than any spoken words. Athena's lessons returned to him. Patience, observation, wisdom. The hero checked his gifts carefully. The winged sandals rested securely upon his feet. The magical pouch hung at his side. The helmet of invisibility remained ready. Most important of all was the shining shield. Its polished surface reflected the growing light of dawn. Soon he began walking. The path wound between jagged cliffs and dark outcroppings of stone. The landscape felt ancient, untouched, as though it belonged to an earlier age of the world. Somewhere ahead lay Medusa. Ancient Greek storytellers often placed monsters at the edges of civilization, not simply because such places seemed frightening, because they represented the unknown itself. Every journey into darkness became a journey into uncertainty. Every monster reflected fears that ordinary life could not easily explain. Perseus moved carefully. Each step echoed softly against bare rock. The smell of salt drifted from distant seas, far overhead. Clouds crossed the morning sky. Hours passed. Then he found the place. A hidden valley surrounded by cliffs. A place half concealed from the world. The entrance appeared ordinary enough. Yet the atmosphere felt wrong. Heavy, oppressive. The hero immediately sensed danger. Ancient audiences would have recognized this moment. The threshold, the final approach, the point where preparation gives way to action. Perseus pulled the helmet of invisibility over his head. Instantly, he vanished from sight. The world remained unchanged around him, but now he moved unseen. The gift of Hades would allow him to approach without attracting attention. Slowly, he entered the valley. The shadows deepened. The air grew colder. Ahead stood strange shapes, more statues, dozens of them, perhaps hundreds. Victims gathered through generations. Some still appeared remarkably lifelike. Others had weathered beneath years of sun and rain. Together they formed a silent city of stone. The sight stirred conflicting emotions. Fear, sadness, determination. How many dreams had ended here? How many journeys had reached this final point? No one could know. At the center of the valley stood a dark cavern. Its entrance resembled an open wound in the rock. The darkness beyond seemed almost alive. Perseus approached cautiously. The polished shield remained before him. He did not look directly ahead. Instead, he watched the reflection. The technique felt strange, unnatural, yet Athena's wisdom guided every movement inside the cavern. The light faded quickly. Cool air brushed against his skin. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. The faint sound echoed through winding passages. Then he saw them, not directly, only in the shield. The Gorgons, three sisters resting within the shadows. Most traditions identify them as Athena, Euryale, and Medusa. The first two were immortal. Only Medusa could die. The distinction mattered greatly. Without it, the quest would have been impossible. Perseus slowed his breathing. The shield revealed the scene in silver reflection. Twisted forms, coiling serpents, dark wings folded against stone, even reflected. The sight unsettled him. The snakes moved constantly. Their scales glimmered faintly. The sound resembled dry leaves rustling in autumn winds. For a moment, another question arises. What had Medusa truly been before becoming this creature? Different stories continued offering different answers. Some traditions remembered beauty. Others remembered only monstrosity. The uncertainty lingers even now. Ancient myths often preserve multiple truths simultaneously. Perhaps that is why they endure. Perseus advanced carefully. Each step carried enormous risk. One mistake, one glance, one moment of carelessness. Everything would end. The hero trusted Athena completely, not because the goddess guaranteed success, because her wisdom had brought him this far. The shield reflected every detail, every movement, every shadow. At last he stood close enough. The moment had arrived, the culmination of prophecy, preparation, and divine guidance. Perseus raised his weapon. Ancient artists and poets describe the act differently. Some emphasize speed, others precision, yet all agree upon the outcome. With a single decisive strike, Medusa's head was severed. The cavern exploded into chaos. The immortal Gorgons awakened instantly. Their terrible cries echoed through the valley. The sound shook the surrounding cliffs. Snakes writhed violently. Dark wings spread wide. Yet Perseus did not hesitate. Athena's lessons had taught him something essential. When action becomes necessary, doubt can be dangerous. Quickly he placed Medusa's head within the magical pouch. The dreadful power remained active even after death. Direct contact remained impossible. The hero then fled. Winged sandals lifted him into the air. Below, the enraged Gorgon searched desperately, but the helmet of invisibility concealed him completely. The gifts had worked together perfectly. Every tool, every lesson, every warning. Athena's plan had succeeded. As Perseus soared above the cliffs, another miracle occurred. One of the most famous in all Greek mythology. From the blood of Medusa emerged two beings, the warrior Chrysaor and a magnificent winged horse, Pegasus. The image captivated generations. The shining horse rising into the sky, freedom emerging from tragedy, beauty emerging from darkness. Some scholars believe the symbolism carried deep meaning for ancient audiences. Others caution against simple interpretations. As always, mythology leaves room for mystery. Pegasus ascended into the heavens. The creature's white form caught the sunlight. For a brief moment, horse and hero shared the same sky. Then the legendary beast vanished into the distance, far above the world. Athena watched. The goddess remained silent, yet the significance of the victory was clear. Perseus had succeeded where countless others had failed. Not because he was strongest, not because he was favored by fate alone, because he listened, because he learned, because wisdom guided courage. The lesson would become central to Athena's relationship with future heroes. Again and again, she would reward intelligence over reckless strength. Again and again, she would prove that understanding changes destiny. As evening approached, Perseus flew across the sea. The cursed valley faded behind him. The horizon glowed gold beneath the setting sun. At last, for the first time since the quest began, he allowed himself a moment of relief. The impossible task was finished, or so it seemed. Yet mythology rarely allows peace to last long. Ahead waited new dangers, new choices, and another life hanging in the balance. For far away, beside a lonely shore, a princess named Andromeda was about to meet her fate. And the stars were already moving her story toward Perseus. The sea stretched endlessly beneath Perseus. Far below, waves rolled across deep blue waters. White foam traced delicate patterns along distant coastlines. Above, clouds drifted slowly through a bright afternoon sky. The hero traveled swiftly now. The winged sandals carried him across lands few mortals would ever see. Behind him lay the valley of the Gorgons. Behind him lay fear, stone statues, and shadowed caves. Yet the journey home remained unfinished. The Greeks often structured heroic tales this way. Victory over one challenge frequently opened the door to another. The path of destiny rarely followed a straight line. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Perseus noticed something unusual below. A coastline, rocky cliffs, a broad stretch of shore, and standing near the water, a solitary figure, even from the sky. The scene appeared strange. The figure did not move. The figure seemed bound, curious. Perseus descended. Sea winds rushed past him. The scent of salt grew stronger. Waves crashed rhythmically against the rocks. As he approached, the truth became clear. A young woman stood chained to a cliff beside the sea. The setting sun illuminated her pale garments. Golden light shimmered across the water behind her. The image seemed almost unreal, like something from a dream. Perseus landed nearby. For a moment, neither spoke. The sea filled the silence. Then the hero learned her name. Andromeda, the princess of Ethiopia, one of the most famous women in Greek mythology. Yet her story had begun long before Perseus arrived. And like many myths, it began with pride. Andromeda's mother was Queen Cassiopeia. Ancient traditions describe her as beautiful, powerful, and perhaps too confident. One day, according to the myth, Cassiopeia boasted that she surpassed the Nereids, the sea nymphs beloved by Poseidon. The claim reached divine ears, as often happened in Greek mythology. Arrogance carried consequences. Poseidon became enraged. The sea god punished the kingdom severely. Storms battered the coast. Floodwaters threatened settlements. A terrible sea monster appeared. The creature ravaged the land. Fear spread through the kingdom. The people sought answers. Priests consulted sacred traditions. Messengers traveled to distant oracles. Eventually, a prophecy emerged. Only one sacrifice could save the realm. Andromeda, the innocent daughter, would pay for her mother's pride. Ancient audiences often found this aspect of the myth troubling. Why should one person suffer for another's mistake? The question has no simple answer. Greek myths frequently explore the painful complexity of fate. Actions ripple outward. Consequences touch many lives. Justice and suffering do not always align neatly. As Perseus listened, the evening sky deepened into shades of crimson and gold. Seabirds circled overhead. The air smelled of salt and approaching night. The princess remained remarkably calm, or perhaps exhaustion had replaced fear. No one can know. Ancient storytellers preserve the broad outline of her fate. Her private thoughts remain hidden. That mystery gives the scene additional power. Perseus looked toward the sea. Far beyond the waves, something moved. A dark shape. Enormous. Ancient. The monster approached. The water churned around its massive form. Even at a distance, its size seemed frightening. The sea itself appeared disturbed by its presence. Many versions identify the creature as Cetus. Others simply describe it as a monstrous beast sent by Poseidon. Its exact appearance varies considerably among surviving traditions. Some artists depicted a giant serpent. Others imagined a dragon-like creature. Still others portrayed something resembling a vast sea animal. The uncertainty remains, and perhaps that uncertainty makes the monster more frightening. Each listener imagined something different. Perseus did not hesitate. The Greeks admired decisive action when guided by wisdom. The hero had already learned an important lesson from Athena. Fear must be acknowledged, but it cannot be allowed to rule. As darkness approached, he prepared for battle. The sea monster surged closer. Waves exploded against the cliffs. Spray filled the air. The roar of water echoed across the coast. Andromeda watched. The kingdom watched. The future balanced upon a single moment. Ancient poets described the battle dramatically. Perseus soared above the waves. The winged sandals carried him beyond the creature's reach. Again and again he attacked from the air. The monster lunged upward. Its massive jaws snapped shut upon empty air. Water crashed in every direction. The sea became a battlefield. The setting sun vanished below the horizon. Moonlight began replacing daylight. Silver reflections danced across restless waves. The struggle continued. At last Perseus saw an opportunity. Different storytellers describe the final victory differently. Some emphasize swordsmanship. Others suggest a more strategic approach. A few versions even hint that Medusa's head played a role. Whatever happened, the outcome remained the same. The monster fell. The sea grew quiet. The danger ended. A great cheer rose from the shore. The kingdom had been saved. Andromeda was freed from her chains. The cool night breeze carried away the last echoes of fear. Ancient listeners loved this moment, not simply because a monster had been defeated, because innocence had been rescued, order had been restored, hope had triumphed over despair. Yet Athena's influence still lingered beneath the surface. The victory required courage, but courage alone would not have been enough. Perseus succeeded through preparation, adaptability, and clear thinking. The goddess's lessons continued shaping his actions. As the night deepened, celebrations began. Torches illuminated palace courtyards. Music echoed through marble halls. The scent of roasted food filled the warm air. For the first time in many days, Perseus rested among friends rather than dangers. Andromeda remained at his side. A bond had formed between them. Some myths describe immediate love. Others suggest affection grew gradually. The surviving traditions vary. Human emotions rarely fit neatly into simple stories. Outside the palace, the stars filled the heavens. Athena's owl appeared briefly upon a distant rooftop. Few noticed. The bird remained only a moment before disappearing once more. A sign, a reminder. The goddess still watched. Yet another mystery accompanied the celebration. One elderly priest reported an unusual dream. He claimed to see a great city rising beside the sea. Marble temples gleamed beneath sunlight. Ships crowded vast harbors. An olive tree stood at the city's center. Then the dream faded. No explanation followed. No name was given. The vision remained unexplained. For now, the Greeks often inserted such prophetic fragments into their stories, threads connecting present events to future destinies. And while Perseus celebrated his victory, Athena's attention had already begun shifting elsewhere, toward other generations, toward future heroes, toward children not yet born. For the age of great champions was only beginning, and somewhere beyond the horizon of time, another extraordinary child waited for his first breath. A child whose strength would become legendary, a child named Heracles. The celebrations lasted many days. Music echoed through palace halls. Torches flickered beneath carved stone archways. The scent of roasted meats and sweet wine drifted through warm evening air. For the people of the kingdom, the nightmare had ended. The sea monster was gone. The storms had passed. Andromeda was safe. The future once again seemed bright. Yet mythology rarely pauses for long, even in moments of joy. Destiny continues its patient work. Perseus remained for a time beside Andromeda. The bond between them deepened. Ancient storytellers generally agree on this much, though details vary from one tradition to another. Some poets describe immediate devotion. Others portray a slower affection built through shared experience. Whatever the exact truth within the myth, their lives became joined. The hero who crossed the world and the princess rescued from the sea would travel forward together. But before that future could fully unfold, another challenge emerged. Not from monsters, not from distant gods, from wounded pride. And wounded pride often proves dangerous. When Perseus sought Andromeda's hand, a complication appeared. According to several traditions, she had already been promised to another man, a relative named Phineus. The arrangement had existed before the arrival of the hero. Now Phineus saw everything slipping away. The princess, the kingdom's gratitude, the admiration of the people. Jealousy took root. Like so many figures in Greek mythology, Phineus became trapped by emotions he could not master. One evening, during a wedding celebration illuminated by countless torches, the conflict erupted. You can imagine the scene. Music fills the hall. Guests laugh and converse. Golden light dances across polished floors. Outside, moonlight rests upon quiet courtyards. Then shouting begins. Weapons flash. Chaos spreads through the gathering. Ancient sources describe the confrontation differently. Some emphasize the scale of the battle. Others focus upon its emotional intensity. The details shift. The outcome remains constant. Perseus found himself surrounded by enemies. The hero fought bravely, yet numbers alone threatened to overwhelm him. At last he turned to the final gift remaining from his earlier quest, the head of Medusa, even hidden within the magical pouch. Its power endured. Perseus revealed it briefly. Only briefly. The effect was immediate. Those who looked directly upon it became stone. The battle ended. Silence returned. The weapon that had defeated monsters now ended human conflict as well. The moment carries an unsettling quality. Ancient listeners often recognize this. Powerful tools can protect. They can also terrify. The myth leaves room for reflection rather than certainty. Soon afterward, Perseus and Andromeda departed. Their future awaited elsewhere. Yet one final thread from the hero's past remained unfinished. The prophecy, the old warning given to Acrisius long ago. The prediction that began everything. The Greeks frequently returned to this theme because it fascinated them deeply. Can fate be avoided, or do attempts to escape destiny only strengthen it? Years passed. Perseus built a life. Children were born. Kingdoms prospered. The prophecy faded into memory, or so it seemed. Then came a gathering. Some traditions describe athletic games. Others mention a festival. Large crowds assembled beneath bright skies. Competitions filled the day. Athletes tested their strength and skill. The atmosphere felt joyful, ordinary, yet destiny often hides within ordinary moments. Perseus participated in one event involving the discus. The bronze disc flashed through the sunlight as it sailed across the field. For a brief instant, everything seemed perfect. Then something went wrong. A sudden gust of wind, a slight miscalculation. Ancient traditions differ. No one knows exactly. The discus changed course. Across the crowd it flew and struck an elderly spectator. The man collapsed. The gathering fell silent. Soon the terrible truth emerged. The victim was Acrisius. The grandfather Perseus barely knew. The king who once imprisoned Danae. The ruler who had feared prophecy above all else. The prediction had come true, not through murder, not through revenge, through accident. or perhaps through destiny? The myth deliberately leaves the question open. Ancient audiences wrestled with it for centuries. Historians still discuss its meaning today. What matters most is the lesson. Fear drove Perseus to desperate actions, yet those actions failed. The future arrived regardless. The prophecy fulfilled itself, not because Perseus sought it, because fate found its path. The story became one of the most famous examples of Greek thinking about destiny. Human beings possess choices, yet certain larger patterns may remain beyond control. Athena understood such truths perhaps better than anyone. Wisdom does not mean controlling fate. Wisdom means responding to fate wisely. As Perseus matured, this lesson shaped his character. The reckless youth who accepted impossible challenges became something more: a thoughtful ruler, a respected leader, a man shaped by both triumph and loss. Ancient listeners appreciated this transformation. True heroism required growth, not merely victory. One evening, many years later, Perseus stood beside the sea once more. The sun dipped towards the horizon. Golden light spread across calm waters. The air smelled of salt and distant pine forests. Beside him stood Andromeda. Above them, the first stars began appearing. For a moment, the world felt peaceful, complete. The long journey that began within a wooden chest drifting across the sea had reached its quiet conclusion. Yet another mystery surrounded the hero's legacy. Several traditions claim that after death, Perseus and Andromeda were placed among the stars. The constellation Perseus still crosses northern skies today. Nearby shines Andromeda. Modern astronomy and ancient mythology meet in these stories. Different cultures interpreted the stars differently. Yet the Greek tales endured. On clear nights, generations continued looking upward and remembering courage, remembering destiny, remembering Athena's guidance. Far above Olympus, the goddess watched. Another hero's story had reached its end, but her own story continued. Athena's purpose extended beyond a single champion. Perseus had been one thread, important, brilliant, yet only one thread. Now new destinies were beginning elsewhere, far from the sea, far from Cerberus, far from the lands touched by Medusa's shadow. A different child was about to enter the world. A child connected to Zeus, a child surrounded by prophecy before his first breath. One night, as Athena stood beneath a sky crowded with stars, a strange sign appeared. A shooting star crossed the heavens, bright, swift, gone almost instantly. The omen caught her attention. Perhaps it meant nothing. Perhaps it meant everything. Ancient storytellers never fully agreed, but they all understood one thing. The age of heroes was far from over, and soon the world would meet the greatest strongman of Greek mythology, Heracles. The stars wheeled slowly above Olympus. Far below, kingdoms rose and fell. Children were born. Elders passed into memory. The mortal world changed constantly, like waves reshaping a shoreline. Yet Athena remained, watching, learning, guiding. The story of Perseus had become part of Greece's growing tapestry of legends. His victories, mistakes, and fulfillment of prophecy would be remembered for generations. But destiny was already preparing another chapter. This new story would begin not beside the sea, but within the complicated heart of Olympus itself. For even among gods, jealousy could alter the course of history, and few embodied jealousy more fiercely than Hera. The queen of the gods possessed great dignity and authority. Ancient Greeks honored her as protector of marriage and family. Yet mythology also portrays her as deeply wounded by Zeus's many betrayals. The contradictions make her one of the most complex figures in Greek tradition. She could be compassionate. She could be merciless. Sometimes both at once. One evening, beneath a sky glowing with sunset colors, Zeus looked down upon the mortal world. There he noticed a woman named Alcmene. Different traditions describe her beauty in different ways. Some emphasize physical grace. Others focus upon intelligence and virtue, whatever the details. Zeus became captivated. The consequences would echo for generations. The myths surrounding Heracles' conception vary considerably. Ancient storytellers often disagreed about precise events. Historians continue debating which versions emerged first, yet the broad outline remains familiar. Zeus approached Alcmene through divine deception. From that encounter came a child destined for greatness, a child who would inherit extraordinary strength. But before he even entered the world, another force had already taken notice. Hera. The queen's anger ignited immediately. The Greeks frequently portrayed divine emotions as larger reflections of human emotions. Love, resentment, pride, jealousy. These feelings existed among immortals just as they existed among mortals. Hera's hostility toward the unborn child became legendary, and so the future hero entered life already surrounded by conflict. Far above, Athena observed. Unlike Hera, she felt no personal anger toward the infant. Unlike Zeus, she did not view the child as an extension of herself. She watched with a calmer perspective. The goddess recognized potential, nothing more, nothing less. As the months passed, unusual signs reportedly appeared. Ancient traditions preserve several omens connected to Heracles' birth. Not all sources agree. Some stories may have developed later. Others perhaps belong to local temple traditions, now lost. One account tells of an eagle circling repeatedly above Alcmene's home. Another describes strange dreams experienced by nearby priests. A third mentions an unusually bright star visible for several nights. The exact truth remains uncertain. The atmosphere of destiny does not. Everyone sensed that something significant approached. Then the child was born. The Greeks called him Heracles, though that name itself carries a curious irony. It means glory of Hera. Modern readers often notice the contradiction immediately. Why would a child hated by Hera bear such a name? Scholars continue debating the question. Perhaps the name reflected hopes for reconciliation. Perhaps it developed later. Perhaps another explanation once existed and has been lost. The mystery survives. Like many aspects of ancient mythology, the infant appeared ordinary at first glance. Small hands, small feet, bright, curious eyes. Nothing immediately revealed the extraordinary strength hidden within him. Yet destiny seldom announces itself loudly at the beginning. It unfolds gradually. One night, while the child slept peacefully, Hera devised a plan. The queen of the gods intended to eliminate the threat before it matured. Ancient audiences often viewed this episode with a mixture of fear and wonder. It transforms an ordinary nursery into the setting of a mythic test. The moon hung high above the house. Silver light entered through narrow openings. The air felt cool and still. Inside, the infant slept. Then two serpents appeared, large, silent, deadly. They slid through the darkness toward the cradle. Their scales reflected faint moonlight. Their tongues flickered through the air. The image became one of the most famous scenes in Greek mythology. Many artists later depicted it. Many storytellers retold it. The snakes approached. Closer, closer. Any ordinary child would have been helpless. But Heracles was not ordinary. The infant awoke. Instead of crying, he reached out. Tiny hands seized the serpents. Ancient listeners already knew what would happen. The tension came not from uncertainty, but from anticipation. The child tightened his grip. The snakes struggled violently. Then the struggle ended. The infant remained unharmed. The serpents lay still. The room fell silent once more. When adults entered and discovered what had happened, astonishment spread immediately. No explanation seemed possible. No ordinary child could perform such a feat. The sign was unmistakable. The boy possessed extraordinary power, yet strength alone does not create a hero. Athena understood this better than anyone. The Greeks admired physical ability, but they admired wisdom even more. A powerful fool remained dangerous. A wise person could change the world. The challenge ahead would be helping Heracles become more than merely strong. Years later, Athena herself would play an important role in that process. For now, however, the child simply grew. The seasons passed. Spring flowers returned each year. Summer sunlight warmed fields and hillsides. Autumn winds carried the scent of harvests. Winter rains darkened stone roads. The ordinary rhythm of life continued. And within that rhythm, Heracles matured. Stories about his childhood multiplied. Some may preserve ancient memories. Others likely emerged through later storytelling traditions. Separating them completely is impossible, yet they all point toward the same conclusion. The boy's strength increased rapidly. His confidence grew. His reputation spread. People began whispering about him. The child destined for greatness. The child favored by fate. The child hated by Hera. One evening, as Athena stood upon a terrace overlooking the mortal world, another owl landed beside her. The bird remained silent. Below them stretched countless lands, mountains, forests, rivers, cities. Somewhere among them lived the young Heracles. The goddess gazed toward the horizon thoughtfully. A cool wind stirred her cloak. The owl blinked slowly. Then both turned their attention toward a distant future, for strength had awakened. Soon it would face its first true tests. And not all enemies come from outside. Some emerge from within. The years unfolded quietly. Heracles grew beneath changing skies, through long summers scented with wild herbs and olive groves, through winters softened by rain drifting inland from distant seas. Villages prospered, kingdoms traded, priests tended sacred fires, and the child of extraordinary strength slowly became a young man. You can imagine him standing upon a hillside at dawn. Mist lingers in the valleys below. The first sunlight touches distant mountains. Birds sing among cypress trees. The world feels calm, peaceful, yet beneath that calm lies immense potential. The Greeks loved stories about gifted children becoming great heroes, but they understood something important. Natural talent alone is never enough. A powerful body without wisdom can become dangerous. A brilliant mind without discipline can lose its way. Growth requires guidance, even for heroes, perhaps especially for heroes. As Heracles matured, teachers were brought to instruct him. Different traditions preserve different names. Some stories mention famous musicians. Others describe warriors, hunters, and philosophers. The details vary. The lesson remains consistent. Heracles needed education, not simply training. Education. The distinction mattered deeply to Greek audiences. A complete person learned many skills: music, athletics, language, religious customs, self-control, leadership. Each teacher attempted to shape the young hero. Some succeeded, some struggled. For Heracles possessed a difficult combination of qualities. He was generous, he was courageous, but he was also impulsive. Emotion often moved through him with tremendous force. This flaw would eventually bring tragedy. Athena understood it already. Far above Olympus, the goddess watched closely, unlike Perseus, whose greatest gift had been careful thought. Heracles represented a different challenge. His strength could solve many problems. Yet strength sometimes encouraged haste, and haste often created new problems. One story from his youth became especially famous. Ancient sources preserve several versions. As always, the exact details remain uncertain. Yet the episode reveals much about his character. During a music lesson, Heracles became angry. The reason differs depending upon the storyteller. Some describe criticism, others mention disagreement, whatever triggered the conflict. His temper exploded suddenly. The result was disastrous. The teacher was struck and killed. The event shocked everyone. The young hero never intended such an outcome. His strength had exceeded his judgment. Again, the Greeks returned to a central theme. Power without control carries danger. The lesson echoes through countless myths. Athena herself embodied the opposite principle: measured action, disciplined thought, careful restraint. Heracles would spend much of his life learning those same virtues. After the tragedy, his education changed. More time was spent outdoors, more time among forests and mountains, away from crowded halls, away from distractions. You can picture those years. The scent of pine fills the air. Streams tumble across smooth stones. The ground feels cool beneath bare feet. The young hero learns to hunt, to track animals, to understand changing weather, to move through wilderness confidently. The natural world became one of his greatest teachers. Ancient Greeks often viewed wilderness as a place of transformation. Civilization offered comfort. Nature offered growth. Heroes frequently passed through both. As Heracles matured, stories of his achievements began spreading. Travelers carried tales between villages. Merchants repeated them in marketplaces. Shepherds shared them beside campfires. The stories grew with each retelling. Some were probably exaggerated, others perhaps understated. That is the nature of oral tradition. Yet one fact remained undeniable. The young man possessed extraordinary strength. People noticed, and with attention came expectation. Everyone seemed to believe greatness awaited him. Such expectations can feel heavy. Even heroes must carry them carefully. One evening, after a long day of training, Heracles slept beneath open skies. The night air felt cool. Stars covered the heavens. The distant sound of insects drifted through the darkness. Then a dream appeared. Ancient storytellers loved dreams, especially dreams standing at the edge of destiny. In the vision, Heracles walks along a road dividing into two paths. One path appears easy, bright, pleasant. The other climbs toward rugged mountains, difficult, demanding. At the crossroads stand two women. One offers comfort, the other offers purpose. The dream survives in several ancient traditions, though details differ. Some scholars believe it became one of the most influential moral stories associated with Heracles. The meaning seems clear. Every life contains choices. Ease or growth, comfort or achievement. The hero awakens before dawn. The dream lingers, powerfully. Perhaps it came from the gods, perhaps from his own conscience. The myth leaves room for both possibilities. Athena's presence is never stated directly, yet many later interpreters sensed her influence. The vision reflects values closely associated with the goddess: discipline, wisdom, long-term thinking. The difficult path often leads furthest. Years continued passing. Heracles entered adulthood. His broad shoulders and powerful frame became legendary. Yet alongside physical strength, something else slowly developed: responsibility. The change happened gradually. Small decisions, small lessons, small moments of reflection. Growth rarely arrives all at once. Athena appreciated such transformations. Wisdom itself develops similarly, one choice at a time, one lesson at a time, one mistake at a time. Meanwhile, strange reports emerged from several sanctuaries. Priests spoke of unusual omens, birds appearing in unexpected places, dreams repeating similar images, a lion walking beneath unfamiliar stars. The stories varied widely, yet they shared a common atmosphere: anticipation. Something important approached. No one understood exactly what. The Greeks often enjoyed this uncertainty. Prophecy rarely reveals everything immediately. Instead, it offers fragments, pieces of a larger puzzle, far away. Another threat was beginning to stir. A creature, a challenge, a test worthy of Heracles' growing reputation. The Lion of Nemea. Its name would soon become famous throughout Greece. Its hide could not be pierced by ordinary weapons. Its strength terrified entire communities. Travelers avoided the region. Farmers abandoned fields. Fear spread steadily. And though Heracles did not yet know it, destiny was already moving him toward that monster. Athena watched from Olympus. Moonlight reflected from her bronze armor. An owl rested quietly nearby. Neither moved. Both gazed toward this mortal world, toward roads not yet traveled, toward battles not yet fought, toward a hero still learning that the greatest challenges often teach the deepest lessons. The lion waited, and so did fate. The lion waited, far from the cities and sacred hills of Greece, beyond fields warmed by summer sunlight, beyond valleys where shepherds guided their flocks. The beast moved through the wilderness of Nemea. Its reputation spread like a storm before its arrival. Travelers spoke of enormous tracks found in soft earth. Hunters returned with stories of shattered spears. Farmers abandoned homes near the creature's territory. Fear settled over the region. Yet the lion was only part of a larger destiny. The true struggle awaiting Heracles would not begin with claws or teeth. It would begin within his own mind. Ancient Greek mythology often surprises modern readers in this way. The greatest monsters are not always external. Sometimes they emerge from grief, from anger, from confusion, from forces hidden deep within the human heart. Before Heracles could become the hero remembered across centuries, he would first experience tragedy. A tragedy so painful that generations of storytellers approached it with solemn respect. By now the young man had become widely admired. His strength seemed unmatched. His reputation continued growing. He married a woman named Megara. Different traditions provide different details about their life together. Some stories emphasize happiness. Others pass over the years briefly. Yet most agree they built a family. Children were born. A future seemed to unfold before them. You can imagine an evening during that peaceful period. The sun sets behind distant hills. Warm light fills a quiet courtyard. Children laugh nearby. The scent of olive oil and fresh bread drifts through the air. The world appears stable, secure, almost ordinary. Moments like these matter in mythology. They remind listeners what is at stake, what can be lost. Far above Olympus, however, old resentments remained alive. Hera had never forgotten the child she hated, the infant who survived the serpents, the youth whose fame continued spreading, the son of Zeus. Her anger endured. Different ancient sources describe what happened next in slightly different ways. The broad outline remains one of the darkest episodes in Greek mythology. Hera sent a terrible madness upon Heracles. Not constant madness, not permanent insanity. Something sudden, overwhelming. A storm within the mind. The Greeks understood such experiences differently than modern societies. They often interpreted extreme psychological suffering through divine causes. Yet even within myth, the pain feels profoundly human. One day, beneath a perfectly clear sky, disaster struck. No warning announced its arrival. No omen fully explained what was happening. The madness descended. Ancient storytellers rarely describe every detail, perhaps out of respect, perhaps because some suffering resists description. The result was catastrophic. When the darkness finally lifted, Heracles found himself surrounded by tragedy. His family was gone. The people he loved most had died by his own hand. The realization shattered him. Silence followed. Not the peaceful silence of moonlit forests. A heavier silence. The silence that follows irreversible loss. The Greeks treated this moment seriously. They did not celebrate it. They did not excuse it. Instead, they used it to explore questions about guilt, responsibility, and redemption. Questions that remain relevant today. Heracles had committed terrible acts, yet he had not acted freely. How should such suffering be understood? The myth offers no easy answer. Instead, it begins a long journey toward atonement. You can picture the hero wandering alone afterward. The world around him continues as always. Birds still sing, rivers still flow, the sun still rises, yet everything feels different. The scent of flowers means less. The beauty of the landscape brings little comfort. Grief changes perception. Ancient audiences recognize this truth immediately. Heracles' greatest battle had begun. Not against monsters, against despair. One evening he climbed a lonely hillside, overlooking the countryside. The sky glowed with fading twilight. A cool breeze moved through dry grass. The first stars appeared overhead. For a long time he remained motionless, thinking, remembering, suffering. Many heroes in mythology confront physical dangers. Far fewer confront emotional devastation so directly. This episode gives Heracles unusual depth. His future greatness would emerge not despite this tragedy, but through his response to it. Eventually he sought guidance, as many Greeks would have done. He turned toward sacred wisdom, toward prophecy, toward the gods. His journey led him to the Oracle of Delphi. The sanctuary stood among mountains where mist often drifted across rocky slopes. Even today, the site retains a remarkable atmosphere. Ancient visitors considered it one of the most sacred places in Greece. You can imagine approaching it. Mountain air feels cool against your skin. The scent of pine drifts through the breeze. Stone pathways wind toward temples and shrines. Pilgrims arrive from distant lands seeking answers, hope, direction, meaning Heracles joined them. Not as a conquering hero, as a broken man searching for a path forward. The oracle delivered a difficult answer. Redemption would not come easily. The hero must serve King Eurystheus. He must obey commands. He must undertake extraordinary tasks. Only through long labor and sacrifice could atonement be achieved. The instructions seemed harsh, perhaps impossible. Yet they offered something precious, purpose. Even suffering becomes more bearable when connected to purpose. The Greeks understood this deeply. Athena understood it as well, far above. The goddess watched carefully. Unlike Hera, she did not seek punishment, unlike many others. She saw potential beyond the tragedy. Heracles had reached a crossroads. The dream from years earlier now seemed prophetic. The easy road, or the difficult road, comfort, or growth. The choice had returned, this time in a far more painful form. One night, after leaving Delphi, Heracles slept beside a mountain path. The stars burned brightly overhead. Cold air drifted through the darkness. Then another dream appeared. He sees a lion standing upon a rocky ridge. Its eyes reflect moonlight. Behind it stretch 12 distant mountains. Each mountain holds a different shadow. A serpent, a boar, a bull. Shapes difficult to identify. The lion turns and walks toward the first peak. Then the dream ends. When Heracles awakens before dawn, the vision remains vivid. 12 mountains, 12 challenges, 12 steps towards something not yet understood. Ancient storytellers likely recognized the symbolism immediately. The great labor of redemption had begun. The Lion of Nemea waited ahead. And Athena's role in shaping heroes was about to deepen once again. For strength alone would not conquer the trials to come. Wisdom would be needed, perhaps more than ever. The road from Delphi wound through mountains and valleys. Heracles traveled alone. The oracle's command echoed constantly within his thoughts. He would serve King Eurystheus. He would complete impossible tasks. Only then could he find redemption. The burden felt immense, yet for the first time since tragedy struck, he possessed direction. Purpose can feel like a distant lantern during a dark journey. It does not remove the darkness. It helps you move through it. The Greeks understood this deeply. Many myths are not stories of perfection. They are stories of transformation. And Heracles was only beginning to change. As he descended from the mountains, spring covered the countryside. Wildflowers bloomed along rocky slopes. Streams carried snowmelt toward fertile valleys. Birdsong drifted through groves of oak and olive trees. The beauty of the world remained unchanged. Yet Heracles experienced it differently now. Sorrow had altered him. The confident youth of earlier years seemed far away. In his place stood someone quieter, more thoughtful. Pain often teaches lessons that comfort cannot. Eventually, he reached the court of Eurystheus. The king ruled from Tiryns, a city protected by immense stone walls. Even today, the ruins of Tiryns inspire wonder. The enormous blocks used in its construction appeared so large that later Greeks believed giants must have built them. You can imagine Heracles approaching the city. The sun shines brightly overhead. Dust rises beneath his sandals. The massive walls tower above the surrounding landscape. Ahead waits the ruler whose commands will shape his future. Eurystheus greeted the hero with caution. Some traditions portray him as fearful. Others emphasize jealousy. Most agree he never felt entirely comfortable around Heracles. The difference between them was obvious. One possessed authority. The other possessed legendary strength. Such combinations often create tension. Soon the first labor was announced. Heracles must slay the Nemean lion. The monster terrorized the region of Nemea. Ordinary weapons could not pierce its hide. Hunters vanished while pursuing it. Entire communities lived in fear. The task seemed impossible. That was precisely why Eurystheus chose it. Yet impossibility has a curious relationship with heroes. Again and again, Greek mythology places them before challenges that appear hopeless. The point is not certainty. The point is character. How does someone respond when success seems unlikely? Heracles accepted the assignment. Soon he departed once more. The countryside gradually changed as he neared Nemea. Villages became quieter. Roads grew emptier. Travelers avoided the area whenever possible. Stories about the lion circulated everywhere. Some described it as enormous. Others claimed its roar could be heard across entire valleys. A few tales became so exaggerated they bordered on fantasy. Fear often enlarges monsters. Yet beneath the exaggeration lay genuine danger. The lion existed, and people were dying. One evening, Heracles arrived at a small settlement near the creature's territory. The villagers welcomed him cautiously. Hope and fear mixed together. They had heard similar promises before. Other hunters had attempted the task. None returned. As night settled across the hills, Heracles sat beside a fire. The scent of burning wood drifted into the cool air. Stars appeared one by one overhead. Nearby villagers whispered quietly among themselves. Some believed the hero would succeed. Others doubted. No one truly knew. That uncertainty gave the moment its power. Ancient audiences often appreciated such tension. A hero's reputation means little until tested. During the night, another dream visited Heracles. Dreams had become increasingly important throughout his journey. The Greeks believed that significant transitions often attracted symbolic visions. This dream felt different from the others. Clearer, more focused. He sees a vast olive tree standing alone upon a hillside. Its silver leaves shimmer beneath moonlight. An owl rests among the branches. The bird does not speak. Instead, it spreads its wings. The leaves transform into countless shields, bronze surfaces reflecting starlight. Then the vision fades. When Heracles awakens before dawn, he feels strangely calm. The dream remains mysterious, yet comforting. Many later storytellers interpreted such moments as signs of Athena's presence. The goddess rarely announced herself directly. She often guided through symbols, suggestions, insights. The owl had appeared before, and always near important turning points. The next morning, Heracles entered the lion's territory. The landscape felt strangely empty. No birds sang. No shepherds guided flocks across the hills. Only silence accompanied him. The hero soon discovered enormous tracks impressed into soft earth. The prince confirmed what rumors had suggested. The creature was immense, far larger than any ordinary lion. Following the trail required patience. Athena valued patience highly. It is often overlooked in stories focused on battles and adventures. Yet wisdom frequently begins with observation. Hours passed. The sun climbed high overhead. At last Heracles found the lion's cave, or rather, caves. The monster's den possessed two entrances. One opening faced east, the other west. The detail immediately caught the hero's attention. A direct attack might fail. The lion could simply escape through the second opening. The problem required thought, not strength. Thought. Athena's influence appears clearly here. Ancient storytellers deliberately emphasized such moments. The strongest man in Greece succeeds because he thinks, not because he charges forward blindly. Heracles gathered stones, many stones. Patiently he sealed one entrance. The work took time. The sun slowly crossed the sky. Dust coated his hands. Sweat dampened his clothing. Only after completing the task did he enter the remaining opening. Darkness surrounded him. The cave smelled of earth and animal musk. Cool air brushed against rough stone walls. Somewhere ahead, the lion waited. The confrontation finally came. Ancient poets described the battle dramatically. Roars echoed through the cavern. Dust filled the air. The lion attacked with tremendous force. Heracles fought fiercely, yet his weapons proved ineffective. The creature's hide resisted every strike. At last the hero abandoned them entirely. The struggle became physical, raw strength against raw strength. The battle raged through the darkness. Then, after tremendous effort, Heracles prevailed. The lion lay still. Silence returned. The labor was complete, or almost complete. Another challenge remained. How could the impenetrable hide be removed? Again, the answer came through understanding rather than force. Some traditions claim Athena herself appeared briefly. Others suggest the insight arrived through observation. Either way, Heracles discovered the solution. The lion's own claws could cut its hide. The creature possessed the key to its own defeat. The symbolism fascinated ancient audiences. Sometimes solutions exist within the problem itself. Wisdom reveals them. As evening descended over Nemean, Heracles emerged carrying the lion's skin. The setting sun illuminated the hills with golden light. The first labor had ended, not through strength alone, through strength guided by intelligence. Athena's lesson had taken root, and many more would follow. The people of Nemean celebrated long into the night. Fires glowed upon distant hills. Music echoed through village squares. The scent of roasting food drifted through cool evening air. For the first time in many years, fear had loosened its grip upon the region. The lion was gone. Fields could be worked safely again. Roads could reopen. Travelers could move without constant dread. Ancient audiences appreciated this aspect of heroic stories. The greatest heroes did not simply win battles. They restored order. They made ordinary life possible again. As the celebrations continued, Heracles sat quietly apart from the crowds. The lion's skin rested nearby. Its golden fur reflected the firelight. The hero listened to laughter drifting across the darkness. For a brief moment, peace returned. Yet the labor had changed him. Every challenge left a mark. Every victory carried a lesson. Athena understood this better than anyone. Heroes were not shaped by comfort. They were shaped by trials, far above Olympus. The goddess watched the celebrations. Moonlight gleamed across her bronze armor. The owl perched nearby once more. Neither moved. The scene below required no intervention. The first labor had achieved its purpose, not because a monster had died, because a hero had learned. The next morning, Heracles began the journey back to Tiryns. The countryside glowed beneath bright spring sunlight. Wildflowers covered meadows. Fresh breezes carried the scent of flowering trees. The world seemed unusually alive. Yet another labor already waited. The path of redemption stretched far into the future. Ancient storytellers often compare such journeys to climbing mountains. Each summit reveals another beyond it. Each success leads to a new challenge. When Heracles arrived at Tiryns, King Eurystheus received the news with mixed emotions. The impossible task had been completed. The lion's hide proved it. Instead of relief, however, the king reportedly felt unease. Some traditions even claim he became frightened. The hero he hoped to destroy continued succeeding. The stronger Heracles became, the more dangerous he appeared. Fear once again shaped a ruler's decisions, just as it had shaped Perseus long ago. Greek mythology returns repeatedly to certain patterns. Different characters, different eras, the same lessons. Soon Eurystheus announced the second labor. Heracles must destroy the Hydra. At first glance, the task sounded straightforward. Another monster, another battle. The reality proved far more complicated. The Hydra lived within the swamps of Lerna. Ancient Greeks considered the region mysterious, even in ordinary life. Mist often lingered above the wetlands. Pools of dark water reflected gray skies. Strange sounds emerged from reeds and marshes. The setting itself felt suitable for myth. The creature dwelling there only deepened the atmosphere. Descriptions of the Hydra vary. Most traditions agree upon one horrifying characteristic. When one head was severed, two more emerged. The monster seemed almost impossible to defeat. Violence strengthened it. Ancient audiences likely found the symbolism fascinating. Some problems worsen when attacked directly. Some dangers require a different approach. Athena's lessons would become crucial once again. Before departing, Heracles experienced another unusual dream. The dreams had become almost like companions, small lanterns illuminating the road ahead. In this vision, he stands beside a still lake beneath moonlight. The surface reflects the stars perfectly. Then ripples appear. One ripple becomes two. Two become four. Four become countless circles spreading outward. At the center sits an owl, watching calmly, waiting. The image remains mysterious. Yet when Heracles awakens, he feels certain of one thing. The coming challenge will require patience, not force alone. The journey to Lerna takes several days. As he travels southward, the landscape gradually changes. Dry hills give way to marshlands. The air becomes heavier. The scent of damp earth fills the breeze. Water gathers in shallow pools beside the road. Bird calls echo from hidden reeds. The environment itself feels uncertain. Neither land nor water fully dominates. Ancient Greeks often associated such places with danger. Boundaries become blurred. Ordinary rules weaken. As evening approaches one day, Heracles reaches the edge of the swamp. The setting sun glows faintly through layers of mist. Long shadows stretch across dark water. The atmosphere feels strangely quiet. Not peaceful, expectant. You can almost hear the distant croaking of frogs, the rustle of reeds moving in unseen currents, the soft splash of something slipping beneath the water's surface. Nature itself seems to hold its breath. Several local villagers approach cautiously. Their faces reveal exhaustion. Years of fear have worn heavily upon them. They describe livestock disappearing, travelers vanishing, strange sounds echoing through the darkness. The Hydra has become more than a monster. It has become a permanent presence in their lives, a shadow hanging over every day. Heracles listens carefully. This alone demonstrates growth. The younger version of himself might have rushed forward immediately. Now he gathers information, observes, learns. Athena would approve. Wisdom often begins by listening. That night he camps beside the swamp. Mist drifts across the landscape beneath a sky crowded with stars. The air smells of water and decaying vegetation. Somewhere in the darkness, an unfamiliar sound rises briefly, then fades. No one knows exactly where the Hydra's lair lies. Different villagers offer different directions, different stories, different warnings. The uncertainty itself becomes part of the challenge. Ancient myths frequently preserve such ambiguity. No map exists for every danger. Some paths must be discovered personally, far above. Athena gazes toward Lerna. The owl remains beside her. A cool wind moves through the heights of Olympus. In the distance, thunder rumbles softly beyond unseen mountains. Not a storm, not yet, only a reminder. The road ahead remains long. The lion was merely the beginning. Ahead wait 12 shadows, 12 tests, 12 opportunities for transformation. And though Heracles cannot yet see the full path, destiny continues unfolding beneath the stars. Somewhere within the mist-covered marshes, the Hydra waits. Its many heads hidden among reeds and darkness. Its future intertwined with the future of a hero. And as midnight settles over the swamp, another unanswered question lingers. Will strength solve this problem, or will strength alone make it worse? The answer waits with the monster. Morning arrived slowly over the marshes of Lerna. Mist drifted across dark water like pale ghosts wandering through the reeds. The rising sun struggled to penetrate the damp haze. Everywhere the landscape seemed uncertain. Shapes appeared and vanished. Distances became difficult to judge. The swamp felt alive. You can imagine Heracles standing at the water's edge. The air smells of wet earth and decaying vegetation. Moisture clings to every surface. Bird calls echo from unseen places. Nothing about the environment feels welcoming. Yet somewhere within this maze of water and reeds waits the Hydra. The second labor had begun. Ancient audiences often understood the importance of setting. Monsters rarely appear in random places. The environment reflects the challenge itself. The lion of Nemean inhabited rocky hills and caves where strength mattered. The Hydra dwelled in a swamp where certainty disappeared. A different monster, a different lesson. Heracles moved carefully into the wetlands. The lion's skin hung across his shoulders. Its familiar weight offered comfort, a reminder of earlier success. Yet success can be dangerous. The Greeks often warned against becoming overconfident after victory. Every challenge requires fresh thinking. Athena's wisdom demanded adaptability, not repetition. Hours passed. The hero followed narrow paths winding between pools of stagnant water. Reeds towered above him. Their dry stalks whispered whenever the wind stirred. Occasionally he found signs of the monster. Broken trees, deep tracks in soft mud, bones scattered near hidden pools. The evidence accumulated gradually. The Hydra existed, and it was close. By midday, the swamp seemed unnaturally quiet. Even the birds had fallen silent. The change felt significant. Animals often sense danger before humans do. Ancient storytellers frequently used silence as an omen, a warning that something approached. Then came the sound, a low hiss, barely audible at first, almost mistaken for moving water. The sound grew louder, longer, more deliberate. Heracles stopped walking. The reeds ahead began to move, slowly, then violently. Water erupted from a nearby pool. Mud splashed in every direction, and the Hydra emerged. Descriptions of the creature vary greatly. Ancient artists depicted different numbers of heads. Some sources mention 9, others suggest more. The precise number mattered less than the effect. The monster seemed overwhelming. Its long necks twisted constantly. Its scales glistened with moisture. Its eyes reflected cold intelligence. The sight would have terrified most people. Heracles advanced. The battle began immediately. Ancient poets described tremendous violence. The monster struck with incredible speed. Its heads lunged from multiple directions. The swamp itself complicated every movement. Mud slowed progress. Water concealed dangers. Nothing about the environment favored the hero. Still, Heracles fought bravely. One head fell, then another, for a brief moment. Victory seemed possible. Then the problem revealed itself. 2 new heads emerged where one had been severed. The myth had spoken true. The Hydra grew stronger, not weaker. Heracles paused. The realization changed everything. Direct attacks only worsened the situation. The more aggressively he fought, the more dangerous the monster became. The symbolism fascinated ancient listeners. Many problems in life behave similarly. Anger feeds anger. Fear feeds fear. Violence sometimes creates more violence. The lesson extends far beyond mythology. Standing within the swamp, Heracles faced a challenge that strength alone could not solve. For a moment, the battle seemed hopeless. The Hydra continued growing. Its hissing echoed across the marsh. Water churned around its enormous body. Ancient audiences likely felt the tension intensely. The strongest man in Greece had encountered something strength could not overcome. This is precisely the sort of situation Athena valued. Wisdom becomes most important when ordinary solutions fail. Different versions of the myth now diverge slightly. Most include Heracles' nephew, Iolaus. Some emphasize his role more heavily than others. Whatever the exact details, assistance arrived. And that assistance changed everything. Together they observed the problem carefully. Observation. The first step toward wisdom. The heads multiplied after being cut. What if the wounds could be sealed? The idea emerged gradually, not through divine miracle, through thought, through experimentation, through understanding. Again, Athena's influence appears, even if she remains unseen. Ancient storytellers repeatedly associated her with this kind of solution. Not overwhelming power, insight. When another head was severed, fire was applied to the wound. The result proved decisive. The neck sealed. No replacement appeared. At last, a path toward victory existed. The battle continued, slowly, methodically. Each head removed, each wound cauterized. The process required patience, discipline, cooperation, qualities sometimes overlooked when discussing heroes. Yet the Greeks admired them deeply. The struggle lasted hours. The sun moved steadily across the sky. Mist gradually burned away. The swamp steamed beneath growing heat. One by one the heads vanished, until only one remained. The final head possessed a special status. Ancient traditions often describe it as immortal. The detail introduces another layer of meaning. Some problems cannot be destroyed completely. They can only be contained, managed, restricted. The Greeks understood this concept well. Heracles finally defeated the last head, yet instead of destroying it, he buried it beneath an enormous stone. The threat remained imprisoned, unable to return, unable to escape. The solution feels surprisingly thoughtful. Not every victory requires total destruction. Sometimes limitation is enough. As evening approached, silence returned to the marshes. Birdsong gradually resumed. The water settled. The oppressive atmosphere began to lift. The Hydra was gone. The region could breathe again. The people of Lerna would no longer live beneath constant fear. Yet one final detail remained. Heracles dipped his arrows into the Hydra's poisonous blood. The act would influence future events in unexpected ways. Ancient myths often work this way. Victories create consequences. Success plants seeds for future stories. Nothing exists in isolation, far above Olympus. Athena observed the conclusion of the labor. The goddess appeared satisfied. not because another monster had died, because another lesson had been learned. The lion taught courage, guided by thought. The Hydra taught adaptation, the willingness to change strategy when old methods fail. A valuable lesson for heroes, for cities, for entire civilizations. That night, Heracles camped beside the now quiet marsh. The stars reflected in still pools of water. The air felt cooler, cleaner, for the first time since arriving. The swamp seemed peaceful as he slept. Another dream arrived. He sees 12 mountains once more, the same mountains from an earlier vision. Yet now 2 stand behind him. 10 remain ahead. Upon the nearest peak stands an owl, watching, waiting, patient as ever. When the dream fades, the message feels clear. The journey continues. The path remains long, and somewhere beyond the horizon, new challenges are already awakening. The Hydra's swamp grew quiet behind him. Heracles left Lerna beneath a pale morning sky, while mist still curled above dark pools and reeds whispered in the damp wind. The second labor was finished. Yet his road of service had only begun. 2 shadows now stood behind him. 10 remained ahead. The dream had shown him clearly as he walked. The lion skin rested across his shoulders. The poisoned arrows hung at his side. Both were signs of victory, yet both carried memories of danger. Athena understood this better than most. Every gift taken from a trial carries responsibility. Every weapon carries a future consequence. The Greeks often told myths this way. A choice made in one story might return much later, altered by time and sorrow. Nothing was truly separate. When Heracles returned to Eurystheus, the king listened with uneasy eyes. The Hydra was dead, or contained. The distinction mattered, though few spoke of it. The immortal head still existed beneath its stone. The poison still flowed upon the hero's arrows. The swamp was safe, but not purified of all danger. Some problems sleep rather than vanish. Eurystheus, however, cared less about meaning than control. He looked upon Heracles and felt fear. Again the pattern returned, a ruler facing power he could not fully command. Acrisius had feared Perseus. Now Eurystheus feared Heracles. Fear rarely creates wisdom. Soon the king announced another task. Heracles must capture the Ceryneian hind. This creature belonged to Artemis. It was no ordinary animal. Its antlers shone like gold. Its hooves were said to be bronze. It moved with impossible grace through forests and mountains. The labor sounded different from the others. No monster to slay, no village to save from immediate terror. This time, Heracles had to pursue without destroying. He had to capture what was sacred. The challenge revealed a new stage in his transformation. Strength could kill, but could strength restrain itself? That question lingered like an omen. Heracles departed again. The road led into wild country, where pine forests covered hillsides and streams flashed silver beneath sunlight. The air smelled of resin, damp earth, and crushed leaves. Days became weeks, weeks became months. The hind remained always ahead. Sometimes he glimpsed it at dawn, a flash of gold between trees, a delicate shape vanishing into mist. Sometimes he found only tracks near cold streams. The pursuit became almost dreamlike. Ancient storytellers often describe this labor as lasting a full year. Whether meant literally or symbolically, the meaning feels clear. Some lessons require time. You cannot rush patience. You cannot command gentleness. You must learn them slowly. At night, Heracles slept beneath branches stirred by moonlit wind. Owls called from hidden places. Wolves howled far away across dark ridges. One evening, a dream came to him. He saw the sacred olive tree of Athens standing in a snowy forest. Its leaves did not freeze. Beneath it stood the golden hind, calm and unafraid. Athena's owl watched from the branches. Then a voice whispered without speaking, "Do not break what you seek to hold." Heracles awoke before dawn. The dream stayed with him. Its meaning was not difficult, yet living its meaning would be hard. For months he followed the hind across Greece, through valleys softened by spring rain, across summer fields shimmering with heat, into autumn woods scented with fallen leaves, over winter mountains where cold stone pressed against his hands. The animal never seemed exhausted, nor did it seem cruel. It did not attack. It simply remained free. Heracles began to understand that not every opponent is an enemy. This realization marked quiet growth. The earlier hero might have forced an ending. The grieving hero after Delphi might have sought punishment through hardship. Now he learned another discipline, reverence, finally, near a river whose water ran clear over smooth stones. The moment came. The hind slowed, perhaps from weariness, perhaps because fate allowed it. Heracles approached carefully. The air felt cold. Mist drifted above the river. He raised his bow, not to kill, but to wound lightly enough to capture. Some traditions say he used a net. Others say he caught it as it crossed the river. The details differ. The meaning remains steady. He succeeded without destroying the sacred creature, yet success brought danger. Artemis appeared. The goddess of the hunt stood beneath the trees. Severe and radiant, moonlight seemed woven through her presence. Heracles had touched what belonged to her. This was no small offense. Apollo may have stood nearby in some versions. Though traditions vary, the moment was tense. A hero, a sacred animal, and a goddess angered by violation. Heracles did not boast. He did not threaten. He explained. He spoke of the oracle, of service, of Eurystheus, of the burden placed upon him. This, too, showed growth. Words can sometimes succeed where weapons would fail. Artemis listened. The forest held its breath. Leaves stirred softly overhead. At last, the goddess allowed him to continue, provided the hind would be released afterward. The crisis passed, but the warning remained. Divine things cannot be treated as trophies. Athena watched from afar. Heracles had learned restraint. A third shadow moved behind him. Soon came other labors. The Erymanthian boar, raging through snowy mountains. The Augean stables, where filth and neglect had gathered for years. The Stymphalian birds, whose bronze feathers flashed like knives beneath a troubled sky. Each task revealed a different lesson. The boar demanded endurance. The stables demanded humility and clever planning. The birds demanded courage, joined with sound and timing. In one tale, Athena gave Heracles bronze rattles forged by Hephaestus. Their sharp clashing noise drove the deadly birds from hiding. It was a small gift. But small gifts can change destinies. Again, wisdom guided strength. Again, Athena shaped the hero without taking his place. The labors continued beneath changing skies. Heracles crossed rivers, mountains, fields, and foreign roads. He met kings, monsters, strangers, enemies. Sometimes he triumphed cleanly. Sometimes his victories carried unease. Ancient audiences did not require perfect heroes. They understood that greatness and suffering often walked together. As the years passed, the hero changed. His anger did not vanish. His grief did not disappear, but both became tempered by experience, like bronze worked again and again in fire. One night, after another long journey, Heracles slept beside a dying campfire. Above him stretched a sky filled with stars. He dreamed of 12 mountains once more. Now many stood behind him. Only a few remained ahead. Upon the farthest peak burned a strange light. Not like fire, not like dawn. Something higher, something immortal. When he awoke, the embers were fading. Cold air touched his face. He did not yet understand the vision, but Athena did. The road of labor was also a road upward, toward purification, toward memory, toward a fate no ordinary mortal could reach. And still the hero walked on. The remaining labors gathered like distant thunder. Heracles could feel them even before they arrived, as though the world itself carried their weight forward through time. Each completed task had changed him slightly, not into someone else, but into someone refined through pressure. The Greeks often compared such lives to metal forged in fire, unyielding heat, repeated shaping, slow cooling into something stronger than before. Athena watched this transformation with calm attention, not as a judge, not as a ruler, but as one who understands patterns. Strength alone was never the point. Strength guided by understanding was. The next labor led Heracles toward lands where no ordinary map provided comfort. The cattle of Geryon awaited him far in the west, beyond familiar borders, beyond familiar seas. Even the name carried distance within it. West, edge, end of the known world. Before departing, Heracles stood for a moment beneath a clear sky. The wind moved gently across dry grass far away. Olive trees shimmered in sunlight. For a brief instant, the world felt almost still, as though waiting for him to choose whether to continue. Ancient storytellers often placed such pauses before great transitions, moments of silence, moments of reflection, moments where a hero could, In theory, turn back. But Heracles did not turn back. The journey westward was long. Days became weeks. Weeks stretched into months. He crossed rivers whose names would be forgotten by most later storytellers. He passed mountains that seemed to rise endlessly into clouded skies. He traveled through lands where the air felt heavier, older, almost forgotten. At night he slept beneath unfamiliar stars, different constellations, different winds, different silence. Along the way, signs appeared, not always clear, but persistent. A distant owl calling from unseen branches, a sudden clearing in storm clouds, revealing a single bright star, a dream of olive branches bending but never breaking. Athena's presence remained subtle, never overwhelming, never intrusive. Guidance, not control. Eventually, Heracles reached the ocean that marked the boundary of the Western world. The Greeks imagined this sea as something vast and uncertain, where light itself seemed to thin. Here he encountered another symbol of divine assistance, Helios, the sun itself, sailing each night across the ocean in a golden cup. Different traditions describe the meeting in different ways. Some say Heracles was overwhelmed by heat and frustration. Others emphasize exhaustion from travel. But in every version, he needed passage. Helios, impressed by the hero's endurance, offered him the golden cup used to carry the sun across the sea. The image is surreal even by mythic standards. A hero sailing within the vessel of the sun, crossing waters no ordinary ship could survive. Yet Greek mythology often uses impossible images to express truth. Some journeys cannot be made by normal means. They require transformation. Eventually, Heracles reached the land of Geryon, a place of distant pastures and strange horizons. Here the cattle were guarded fiercely, not by a single beast, but by multiple layers of danger. Ancient descriptions vary. Some speak of a two-headed dog, others mention a giant shepherd. Some traditions describe Geryon himself as a being of 3 bodies joined together. The details shift. The challenge remains consistent. This was not a simple herd. It was a boundary of power. Heracles fought through resistance. He endured exhaustion. He overcame obstacles not through sudden brilliance, but through persistent effort. Athena's influence here is quieter than ever. Not in weapons, not in direct intervention, but in endurance itself. The ability to continue. After long struggle, Heracles succeeded. The cattle were secured, the labor completed. Yet even victory here carried consequences. As he drove the herd back toward Greece, new dangers appeared. Storms, robbers, conflicts with local rulers. The world did not easily allow heroes to pass untouched. Every victory created ripple effects. Every action reshaped the world slightly. This too is part of the myth's deeper meaning. Nothing remains isolated. Not strength, not wisdom, not fate. Eventually, Heracles returned once more toward familiar lands. But he was no longer the same man who had begun the labors. The grief was still present. The memory of tragedy still lived within him. Yet something else had grown beside it. Understanding, not full clarity, but enough to move forward without being consumed. At Olympus, Athena stood in silence during one of these returns. The owl beside her turned its head toward the mortal world. Below, the hero moved through his final preparations. A long path still awaited him, but the pattern had become clear. Each labor removed something from him. Each labor added something in return. Loss, then growth, trial, then insight. This rhythm would continue until the final stage of his journey, far beyond the labors themselves, beyond even the boundaries of ordinary mortality. A transformation not yet spoken aloud. As night settled across Greece, Heracles camped once more beneath the stars. The cattle rested nearby. The air was cool and still. Above him, constellations slowly rotated across the sky. He looked upward for a long time, not searching for answers, but acknowledging uncertainty. The Greeks often placed wisdom in such moments, not in victory, not in action, but in reflection. The hero's path was not finished. It was only changing shape, and somewhere far above, beyond even the highest clouds of Olympus, the gods understood what was coming next. A final series of trials, a final confrontation with the limits of human endurance. And after that, something else, something no mortal fully expects. The boundary between life and legend was approaching, quietly, invisibly, like dawn before the sun appears. Athena turned away from the mortal world for a moment, not in disinterest, but in awareness. Even wisdom must sometimes wait. And so the night continued. stars burning steadily above a world still unaware of its approaching turning point. The final labors did not arrive quickly. In myth, as in life, the most important changes often unfold slowly, almost imperceptibly, until one day they can no longer be ignored. Heracles felt this shift, not as a single moment, but as a growing weight behind every step he took. The road home no longer felt like a simple return. It felt like a descent into something larger. The air itself seemed different across Greece. Warmer winds from the sea carried distant salt into inland valleys. Olive groves bent gently under changing seasons. And always, somewhere at the edge of thought, there remained the sense of unfinished purpose. Athena observed this quietly. She did not intervene, not because she was distant, but because wisdom often waits for the right moment to act. The hero had grown beyond simple instruction. Now he would be tested by complexity itself. The next labors took Heracles through landscapes that felt increasingly symbolic rather than purely geographical. One task led him toward horses said to consume human flesh. Another toward gardens, guarded by forces older than kings. Another toward creatures that seemed to exist between nature and myth. Each challenge carried a different texture. Some required strength, some required patience, some required negotiation, some required endurance beyond ordinary limits. Ancient storytellers often arranged these trials deliberately, not as random events, but as stages of transformation. You can imagine Heracles moving through these lands beneath shifting skies, one moment under bright Mediterranean sun, the next beneath storm-heavy clouds rolling in from distant seas. At times he traveled alone, at times accompanied by allies whose names differ across traditions. Each encounter added another layer to his understanding, not just of monsters, but of the world itself. One of the most famous later labors brought him into contact with lands ruled by King Augeas. The stables there had not been cleaned for generations. Filth and neglect had accumulated beyond imagination. The task seemed almost insulting at first glance. No monster, no battle, just labor. Yet beneath it lay something deeper, a problem of scale, of systems, of human neglect over time. Heracles studied the situation carefully. He walked through the stables, observed the flow of water nearby, watched how rivers moved through the landscape beyond the walls. And then he acted, not with brute force, but with redirection. He altered the course of rivers, diverted water through the stables, and in a single day, what had accumulated over years was washed away. The Greeks saw this not merely as clever engineering, but as wisdom applied to disorder. A mind that understands systems can solve what strength alone cannot touch. Athena's presence in this story is not explicit, but it is felt in the choice, in the observation, in the understanding of natural flow. Later, another labor brought Heracles into contact with creatures known as the Stymphalian birds. Their feathers were sharp like metal. Their presence turned forests into danger zones. Again, direct confrontation proved difficult. The swampy terrain made movement hard. The birds attacked from above. Standard weapons were ineffective. At this point, many versions of the myth describe divine assistance more clearly. Athena provides bronze rattles, forged by Hephaestus. Their loud, piercing sound disrupts the birds' formation. Confusion spreads. The creatures rise into the sky, and Heracles is able to strike them as they scatter. It is a moment that reveals something essential. The hero does not win alone. He wins through wisdom offered at the right moment. Tools matter. Timing matters. Understanding matters. As the labors continued, Heracles began to change in quieter ways. His reactions became more measured, his decisions more deliberate. The raw intensity remained, but it no longer controlled him completely. Ancient audiences would have recognized this as true hero development, not perfection, but refinement, not elimination of flaws, but mastery over them. Yet even as growth occurred, pressure increased. Each labor seemed to push him closer towards something final, something unresolved, something not yet spoken aloud in the story. Far above Olympus, Athena stood watching a shifting sky. The owl beside her remained still. Below, Heracles crossed another landscape. The sun was beginning to set. Long shadows stretched across fields and distant hills. The world looked momentarily peaceful, but peace in mythology is often temporary. A pause before the next transformation. A messenger soon arrived in the narrative of fate itself. Different traditions describe this moment in different ways. Some emphasize political conflict, others divine intention, others still human misunderstanding. Yet all agree on one point. Heracles was moving toward the end of his labors, not the end of his story, but the end of one phase of existence, a threshold, a crossing, the boundary between suffering and something else. At night, Heracles dreamed again. This time there was no clear path, only a vast plain under a sky filled with slowly collapsing stars. Each star fell, but did not disappear. Instead, it turned into a doorway, and beyond each doorway stood a different version of himself. Strong, weary, calm, broken, wise, lost. The dream offered no instruction, only reflection. When he awoke, the fire beside him had burned low. The world felt quiet, almost expectant, as if waiting for the final story to begin. Athena's presence was not visible, but it was near, as it always had been. The final labor would soon arrive, and with it, the completion of a long arc that had begun with madness, continued through monsters, and slowly transformed into something far more profound. A question not of strength, but of what strength becomes when it survives everything else. The final labor did not feel like the others. There was no clear path marked by fear, nor a single monster whose presence announced itself across the land. Instead, the world itself seemed to resist explanation, as though reality had grown quieter and more distant. Heracles felt it the moment he was summoned again to Eurystheus. The king had changed too. Fear had not faded. It had deepened. Now it carried caution, calculation, and something like exhaustion. The earlier labors had proven Heracles could not be easily broken. So the final tasks were no longer about brute confrontation alone. They were about the limits of order itself. Ancient storytellers often present this stage of Heracles' journey as something different in tone, less like a hunt, more like a passage through increasingly symbolic thresholds. One of the most mysterious assignments brought him toward the far western edge of the world, toward a place where the sky seemed heavier, where the sea stretched into unfamiliar light, where even the wind felt older than ordinary lands. The Garden of the Hesperides. Even the name carries a soft, distant beauty, a place of evening light, of golden horizons, a fruit that was not meant for mortal hands. No ordinary map could guide him there. Different traditions describe the journey differently. Some say he wandered for months, others say years. Some emphasize travel across lands ruled by strange peoples. Others focus on encounters with divine beings along the way. The uncertainty itself feels intentional. The Greeks did not always seek precision in myth. They sought meaning. At some point along this journey, Heracles encountered the Titan Atlas, a figure condemned to hold the sky upon his shoulders, a punishment older than many gods. The image is almost unbearable when you imagine it fully. A being standing beneath the weight of the heavens themselves, shoulders bent, arms strained, eternity pressing downward. Atlas had knowledge that Heracles needed, the location of the golden apples. But knowledge came with exchange. The Greeks often understood the world as built upon such exchanges. Nothing is gained without cost. Even wisdom. Atlas agreed to retrieve the apples himself. In return, Heracles would temporarily hold the sky. The moment is almost surreal in its simplicity. The strongest man in the world takes the burden of the heavens. The sky presses down upon him, not metaphorically, not symbolically, but as weight beyond comprehension. Heracles stood there, straining, breathing slowly. The horizon felt distorted under the pressure. Mountains seemed closer, the sea far away. Time itself felt stretched. Ancient audiences likely understood this as more than physical endurance. It is a vision of responsibility itself, what it means to hold something larger than yourself. Eventually, Atlas returned with the golden apples. Yet he was unwilling to take back the burden. Some versions describe him offering to deliver them personally to Eurystheus, leaving Heracles permanently in his place. It is a moment that reveals something important about Greek myth. Even cooperation can contain deception. Even assistance can hide escape from obligation. Heracles, however, had learned not only strength, not only endurance, but awareness. He agreed to Atlas's proposal, but requested a small adjustment. He asked the Titan to hold the sky again briefly while he adjusted his cloak for comfort. Atlas, perhaps amused or careless, agreed. And in that moment, Heracles stepped away from the burden. The sky returned to Atlas. The exchange was complete, and the apples were secured. The story carries a subtle lesson. Wisdom is not only knowing what to do, it is also recognizing when others attempt to shift impossible burdens onto you permanently. As Heracles returned once more toward civilization, Another stage of his journey unfolded. Not a monster this time, not a cosmic burden, but something more personal. A return to the world of consequence. Eurystheus received the golden apples with visible unease. The impossible had again been accomplished. And yet completion brought no satisfaction to the king, only the realization that nothing would ever restore control over Heracles. The labors were nearing their end, but the tension they created was not. Athena watched these final developments without intervention. Her role had always been guidance, never domination. The hero had grown beyond needing constant direction. Now he carried the weight of his own decisions. That, too, was part of wisdom. At night, Heracles dreamed once more. The sky was no longer filled with monsters or paths, only a vast horizon of light. And upon that horizon stood a single olive tree, its branches no longer rooted in earth, but in the sky itself. An owl rested upon it, watching silently. When he awoke, the meaning felt closer than before. Something was approaching its conclusion, not an ending in disappearance, but in transformation. The final stage remained. The last labor had not yet revealed itself fully, but the pattern was becoming clear. Each trial had stripped away illusion. Each challenge had refined understanding, and each moment of suffering had reshaped the hero into something neither mortal nor divine in the simple sense. Something in between, a bridge, a warning, a lesson, somewhere beyond the horizon of myth. The final threshold waited, and even Olympus seemed to hold its breath. The final labor did not arrive with noise. It arrived with silence, a silence that felt heavier than all the monsters Heracles had faced before. Even the winds across Greece seemed subdued, as though the world itself was holding back its breath in anticipation of what came next. Heracles stood once more before Eurystheus. The king did not meet his eyes directly. The earlier confidence had faded. What remained was caution shaped into ritual. Some versions of the myth say the king avoided speaking for a long moment, as if searching for one final impossible command that might break the hero. But there was nothing left to break. The cycle had nearly completed itself. Ancient storytellers sometimes describe this final stage differently, depending on tradition. Yet all versions agree on one essential truth. The final labor was not like the others. It was not a monster to be slain, not a creature to be captured, not a task of strength or cunning alone. It was a journey into a place beyond ordinary mortal reach. The Underworld, the realm of Hades, where light itself thinned into memory. The task was to bring back Cerberus, the guardian of the dead, a beast with many heads, bound to the gates of the Underworld itself. The idea carried a weight no previous challenge had possessed. The lion, the Hydra, the distant lands, the impossible creatures of sea and sky. All of them belonged to the world of the living. This did not. This was descent. Not forward movement, but downward passage into what lay beyond life. Athena observed this moment with particular stillness. Even among gods, such journeys were rare. Even among heroes, they were rarer still. Heracles prepared quietly. There was no grand farewell this time. No public celebration, no crowd watching. Only a man approaching the boundary between existence and memory. The journey began. As he moved southward, the land gradually changed. The colors seemed to dim. Forests grew thinner. Rivers ran darker beneath clouded skies. Even sunlight appeared less certain, as though it struggled to remain present. At certain points along the way, ancient traditions say Heracles encountered guides. Some mention Hermes. Others speak of shadowed passages known only to the initiated. The details shift depending on the storyteller, but the meaning remains stable. No one enters the underworld alone. Eventually, he reached the entrance, a place where rock descended into darkness. The air itself felt colder, not simply in temperature, but in presence, as though life was withdrawing step by step. Heracles paused. For perhaps the first time in all his labors, hesitation touched him. Not fear of monsters, but recognition of limit. Every hero eventually reaches a boundary where strength alone cannot define the path forward. He stepped inside. The descent was long. Stairs carved into stone led downward into increasing darkness. Sound changed. Even breathing felt different. Echoes followed his movements in unnatural ways. Then came the river. Styx, the boundary between worlds. The water moved slowly, yet its stillness felt absolute. A boat waited nearby. Its ferryman, Charon, guided souls across. Ancient tradition says Heracles was unusual among passengers. He was alive, fully alive. Such a presence disturbed the natural order of the crossing. Different versions of the myth describe tension here. Some say Charon resisted, others say divine authority intervened. In most accounts, Heracles crossed, because even death itself could not fully deny him passage. On the far side lay the realm of Hades, a landscape neither fully dark nor fully light, but something in between. Fields of pale earth, silent plains stretching into distance, rivers winding through memory-like terrain. Shadows moved without clear origin. Here, Heracles encountered souls, not as enemies, but as echoes, figures from ancient wars, forgotten kings, travelers who never returned. The atmosphere carried a strange stillness, not fear, but permanence. He continued onward, until at last he reached the throne of Hades. The god of the underworld sat in quiet authority. Unlike many Olympians, Hades is often portrayed not as chaotic or emotional, but as steady, unyielding, inevitable. Heracles explained his purpose, the final labor, the command of Eurystheus, the need to bring Cerberus to the world of the living. The request was extraordinary, even within mythic logic. Yet Hades listened. The underworld does not reject necessity. It responds to order. A condition was given. Heracles could take Cerberus, but he must not use weapons, no violence that would disrupt the balance of death. Only strength. Controlled, measured, willing. Athena's influence becomes especially clear here. Strength restrained by understanding. Power guided by limitation. The hero descended deeper once more until he reached the gates. There Cerberus waited, a massive creature with multiple heads, each watching in different directions, each aware of everything at once. The guardian of the dead. The final threshold. Heracles approached. The confrontation was immense, not chaotic like earlier battles, but structured, almost ritualistic. He did not strike with weapons. He grappled, endured, held. The struggle is described by ancient poets as long and exhausting. Yet gradually, through persistence rather than destruction, he subdued the creature, not by killing it, but by overpowering it. The symbolism is clear. Some forces are not meant to be destroyed, only controlled. Cerberus was bound and brought upward. As they ascended, light slowly returned, not suddenly, but gradually, like memory returning after a long dream. When Heracles finally emerged into the world of the living, the transition felt almost unreal. Air felt different, sky felt wider, sound felt sharper. The underworld remained behind, and the final labor was complete. At Tiryns, Eurystheus saw the creature and was overcome with fear. The king reportedly begged for its removal. The cycle of labors had ended. 12 trials, 12 transformations, 12 thresholds crossed. Heracles stood quietly, not as the man who began the journey, but as someone reshaped by it entirely. Yet mythology rarely ends at completion, because completion is not always conclusion. It is transition, far above Olympus. Athena observed the hero's return. The owl beside her remained still. The labors were finished, but something larger had been formed. A pattern, a lesson, a reflection of what it means for strength to survive its own consequences. And as the sun set over Greece, casting long shadows across fields and mountains, the world seemed to understand something quietly. The age of trials was ending, but the age of meaning had only just begun. The completion of the 12 labors did not feel like an ending. It felt like the air after a storm, when everything is still wet, shaken, and uncertain of its shape. Heracles' return to Greece changed in ways that were not immediately visible. His strength remained, perhaps even greater than before. But something inside him had shifted. The endless cycle of command and survival was gone. In its place stood something quieter, something heavier, purpose without instruction. Ancient storytellers often struggled with what came after mythic trials. Monsters are easier to understand than aftermath. Victory is simpler than consequence. Athena watched this phase carefully, not because there was danger in the same sense as before, but because meaning itself had become the challenge. Heracles moved through lands he once traveled with urgency. Now he moved more slowly, as if the world required time to be understood again. Fields stretched across Greece beneath warm sunlight. Olive trees shimmered in gentle wind. Rivers reflected soft skies. Life continued as it always had. Yet Heracles no longer belonged to it in the same way. He had crossed too many boundaries, seen too many things that could not be unseen. In some traditions, he sought purification. In others, reconciliation. In all versions, he carried a deep awareness that violence, even when necessary, leaves marks that cannot be erased. The Greeks did not present this as simple guilt. It was something more complex, a recognition of cost. Not every victory feels like triumph. Some feel like survival. Athena's role during this period becomes quieter in the myths. She does not guide battles now. She does not provide weapons or direct intervention. Instead, her presence becomes symbolic, a reminder that wisdom remains even when action ends. One evening, Heracles stood upon a hill overlooking the sea. The horizon stretched endlessly before him. The sky was filled with slow-moving clouds, tinted gold by sunset. Wind passed through tall grass around his feet. The world felt both familiar and distant. It is said that at moments like this, heroes often feel the weight of their own legend. What others see as glory, they experience as memory. What others call victory, they feel as distance. The past does not leave. It simply changes form. As night approached, Heracles thought of all he had seen. The lion that could not be pierced, the swamp where wounds multiplied, the distant lands beyond known maps, the descent into the underworld. Each memory layered upon the next, not as trophies, but as transformations. Then, as the first stars appeared, something subtle occurred. An owl crossed the sky above him, silent, steady, not lingering long enough to demand attention, but long enough to be noticed. Heracles did not speak. He simply watched it disappear into darkness. The Greeks often used such moments to signal transition, not narrative closure, but philosophical shift. What does a hero become when the trials are over? That question does not have a single answer. In some traditions, Heracles married again. In others, he traveled widely. Some stories focus on later adventures. Others emphasize his eventual apotheosis, his transformation into a figure among the gods. The details vary, but the direction remains consistent. The mortal becomes something more than mortal, yet not entirely removed from humanity. That in-between space is where myth often lives most deeply. Athena, for her part, is often present at this threshold. She does not erase Heracles' past. She does not undo what he has endured. Instead, she represents continuity, wisdom that survives change, meaning that persists through suffering. One version of the myth describes Heracles finally being granted immortality after his mortal struggles end, not as escape, but as recognition. A life fully experienced cannot be reduced to a single moment of suffering or success. It becomes something larger, a story carried forward. As Olympus receives him among the gods in some traditions, Hera's long hostility is said to soften, not vanish, but transform. Even divine conflict eventually changes shape. Athena stands among the Olympians during this transition, watching, not intervening. The owl at her side remains still. There is no need for further guidance. The hero has already become what he needed to become on Earth. Temples and stories begin to spread more widely. Heracles becomes more than a man. He becomes a symbol. Strength endured through suffering. Action shaped by consequence. Endurance refined into meaning. Yet even in this elevated state, something human remains. The memory of loss, the awareness of cost, the understanding that greatness is never without shadow. As night deepens over Greece, the final image of this phase is often quiet. Not a battle, not a triumph, but a man standing beneath a sky filled with stars. No longer running from fate, but no longer bound by it in the same way either. Athena's presence lingers in that stillness, not as command, but as understanding, and somewhere far beyond Olympus, beyond mortal sight. The threads of other stories continue to gather. New heroes will come, new trials will form, new patterns will repeat. But for now, the story rests. Not finished, only paused. Like breath held between one age and the next, the world does not end when a hero's trials end. It simply continues. Softer in some places, heavier in others, as though adjusting itself around what has changed. Heracles stood at the edge of that change, no longer bound by the rhythm of the labors, no longer driven forward by command alone, yet not entirely free either. Freedom in Greek myth is rarely absolute. It is something negotiated between fate, gods, and the limits of the soul. Athena observed this transition without urgency. Some transformations cannot be rushed. They unfold like dawn, slowly, inevitably, beyond the mortal world. Olympus remained unchanged in structure, yet altered in atmosphere. The gods continued their eternal existence. But even immortals are shaped by the stories they witness. Heracles had become one of those stories that could not be ignored. A mortal who endured what mortals were not meant to endure. A strength that survived its own consequences. A life that passed through suffering without breaking into nothingness. In some traditions, Hera's long opposition begins to shift at this stage. Not into forgiveness, exactly, but into recognition. The hero she once tried to destroy had become something she could no longer define through hostility alone. This ambiguity is important. Greek mythology often refuses simple emotional resolutions. Even among gods, change is gradual, complex, incomplete. It is said that Zeus, in recognition of Heracles' completed trials, offered him a place among the immortals, a transformation not of body alone, but of existence itself. The idea of apotheosis carried deep meaning for ancient audiences. It suggested that extraordinary human experience could transcend mortality, not by escaping it, but by fully passing through it. Heracles did not forget what he had done. That is crucial. In myth, transformation does not erase memory. It incorporates it. You can imagine him standing once more upon a high place, perhaps a mountain, perhaps a quiet ridge overlooking sea and sky. The wind moves gently through his hair. Below him, the world continues its ordinary rhythms. Fishermen casting nets, farmers tending fields, children running through sunlit streets. Life, unchanged and endlessly renewing. Above him, the sky opens wide, not as a battlefield now, but as distance, perspective. Athena's presence is often felt most strongly in these moments of clarity. She does not celebrate victory. She does not dwell on suffering. She represents something steadier, understanding that remains after emotion fades. An owl circles once above the horizon in some traditions, not dramatic, not symbolic in a loud way, just present, then gone. The myth does not always explain what comes next for Heracles in precise terms. Different traditions diverge here. Some place him among the gods on Olympus, seated beside divine figures, finally at peace, within a realm beyond mortal pain. Others emphasize continued wandering, his name carried through new tales and local legends. Still others focus on his lasting presence in cult worship, where he becomes a figure of protection, endurance, and strength invoked by ordinary people facing their own struggles. All versions share a common thread. Heracles does not disappear. He becomes distributed across stories, across places, across memory. Athena, too, remains part of that memory. Her role is never that of possession or ownership over the hero. Instead, she becomes embedded in the structure of his meaning. Wisdom that appears at turning points. Insight that transforms brute force into direction. The shield that allows sight without destruction. The owl that watches without intervening. These symbols endure long after specific events fade, because they speak to something broader than narrative. They speak to perception itself. And perception is what allows myths to survive across generations. In later Greek culture, Heracles becomes both hero and archetype, a figure invoked in moments of difficulty, a reminder that suffering can be transformed rather than only endured, that strength without guidance leads to destruction, and that even destruction can become the beginning of understanding. Temples dedicated to him often stood at crossroads or near places of travel, not because he represented stillness, but because he represented passage, movement through danger toward meaning. Athena's influence in such spaces is subtle but persistent. She is not the goddess of endings. She is the goddess of clarity within motion. Even now, in the quiet aftermath of mythic labor, the deeper lesson settles into place. Heracles' journey was never simply about defeating monsters. It was about learning how to exist within a world where monsters, gods, and human choices are intertwined. As twilight falls across Greece in the final images of this section, the land becomes soft with shadow. Olive trees darken into silhouettes. The sea reflects fading gold. Mountains hold the last light upon their ridges. And somewhere within that fading light, the memory of Heracles remains, not as a single moment, not as a single act, but as a sequence of transformations, each one shaped by struggle, each one guided, in quiet ways, by wisdom. Athena's presence does not need to be declared. It is already woven into the structure of the story itself. In the way insight interrupts force, in the way reflection follows action, in the way meaning survives long after events end. And so the myth does not truly close. It settles, like dust after a long journey, like silence after a final word has been spoken. like sleep arriving not as an ending, but as a continuation of thought into another form. Long after Heracles was no longer walking the earth as a wandering mortal, his presence did not fade. It changed shape. That is how myth survives. It never truly ends. It transforms into memory, then into story, then into something that feels almost alive whenever it is spoken aloud. Across Greece, people continued to tell his story beside fires at night, in small villages where olive trees bent in the wind, in coastal towns where waves struck stone harbors under moonlight, in mountain sanctuaries where cold air carried the scent of pine and incense. Everywhere, Heracles remained present, not as a man, but as a pattern. Athena's influence is felt in this persistence. She is the goddess of intelligence, craft, and enduring clarity. And stories themselves are a kind of craft, a weaving of memory and meaning, like cloth formed on a loom that never stops moving. In some versions of the tradition, Heracles is fully welcomed into Olympus after death, not as a visitor, but as an immortal presence among the gods. He sits among divine figures who once shaped his trials. Zeus regards him not as a mistake of mortal passion, but as a completed destiny. Hera, too, is no longer defined solely by opposition. The tension between them, in mythic terms, becomes something quieter, not erased, but integrated into a larger order. Athena stands among them, not as participant in conflict, but as witness to transformation. She does not need to speak. Her presence implies understanding. The owl, her familiar companion, appears in later artistic traditions as a symbol of perception rather than judgment. Seeing clearly without distortion, this becomes one of the lasting meanings of Heracles' story. Not just strength, not just endurance, but the ability to see one's own path without being consumed by it. Yet on Earth, the human world continues as it always has. Kings rise and fall, cities expand and decay, storms reshape coastlines, fires warm homes and sometimes destroy them. Life continues its endless cycle. And within that cycle, Heracles becomes something people call upon rather than simply remember. In times of hardship, his name is spoken, not as invocation of perfection, but of survival, when labor feels endless, when strength is not enough, when suffering seems without meaning. The story of Heracles offers a different possibility. That meaning can emerge after struggle, not before it. That transformation often arrives only after endurance has already done its work. Athena's presence in these later interpretations is subtle but constant. She is not the voice that demands action. She is the clarity that arrives after confusion, the understanding that comes once noise has faded. In some temples dedicated to Heracles, offerings were made not only to strength, but to perseverance, to the idea that a human life is measured not only by what it achieves, but by what it survives and learns from. This is where myth becomes more than narrative. It becomes reflection, a way for ancient audiences to understand themselves through the lives of figures larger than life. Even the monsters Heracles faced take on new meaning in this reflective space. The lion becomes more than a beast. It becomes resistance that cannot be bypassed. The Hydra becomes more than a creature. It becomes a symbol of problems that multiply when attacked without understanding. Cerberus becomes more than a guardian. It becomes the boundary between what can be changed and what must be accepted. And through all of this, Athena remains the quiet constant, not dominating the story, but shaping how the story is understood. As evening falls across this final reflective section of the myth, the world feels less like a stage and more like a memory unfolding in slow motion. The olive trees stand still beneath fading light. The sea breathes in long, steady rhythms against the shore. Stars begin to appear one by one, distant and unchanging. And in that stillness, the story of Heracles feels less like an ending and more like something preserved. A set of impressions left upon the world. Strength, loss, wisdom, transformation, and the quiet recognition that none of these exist alone. They are always intertwined. Athena's owl appears one last time in the imagination of the listener, not as a symbol of arrival or departure, but as continuity, a reminder that seeing clearly is not a moment. It is a practice. And Heracles, in all his trials and transformations, ultimately becomes part of that practice. A story that teaches without speaking, A memory that continues to shape how strength is understood. A myth that remains alive, not because it is finished, but because it still offers something to reflect upon. The night deepens, the world grows quieter, and the story rests. Not as an ending, but as a presence that lingers gently in thought. The stories of heroes do not vanish when their lives end. They drift outward, carried by voices, carried by memory, carried by time itself. Heracles becomes one of those stories that refuses to settle into a single shape. In one telling, he is a man lifted into Olympus, seated among gods who once shaped his trials. In another, he is a wandering memory across Greece, invoked in moments of struggle. In another still, he is a symbol embedded into the landscape itself, as permanent as mountains and rivers. And always, beneath these shifting versions, something remains consistent. A journey from suffering to meaning, a passage through darkness into understanding. Athena's presence is woven through all of it, though rarely loud. She does not compete with the hero's strength. She does not overshadow his pain. Instead, she exists in the spaces between actions, in the moment before a decision is made, in the pause where understanding appears, in the quiet clarity that follows chaos. The Greeks often imagined Athena not only as a goddess, but as a way of seeing. To see clearly is already to be halfway toward wisdom. And wisdom, in myth, is never separate from survival. As centuries pass in the imagination of later storytellers, Heracles becomes more than an individual figure. He becomes a reflection of human endurance itself. Temples dedicated to him appear in different regions, sometimes near crossroads, sometimes near cities recovering from hardship. People do not worship him as perfection. They invoke him as persistence. When burden feels too heavy, his name is remembered. When strength fails, his story is recalled. When suffering continues without explanation, his journey offers a kind of structure that does not remove pain, but gives it context. Athena's influence persists within this cultural memory as well. She is not present as spectacle. She is present as interpretation, the understanding that even chaos contains patterns. Even suffering contains direction. Even trial contains instruction. Her owl, in later artistic imagination, becomes less a creature and more a reminder, not of surveillance, but of attention, to notice what others overlook, to perceive what lies beneath surface events. In this way, the myth of Heracles and Athena does not remain confined to ancient Greece. It expands outward into something more universal, a way of thinking about strength that is not isolated from wisdom, a way of thinking about wisdom that does not deny suffering, and a way of thinking about suffering that does not end in meaninglessness. On quiet evening, imagined in this mythic world, one can picture Athena standing above the landscape of Greece. The olive trees below her move gently in the wind. The sea reflects a sky slowly dimming into night. Cities flicker with small points of light. Life continues in its ordinary rhythm. And yet beneath that ordinariness lies the accumulated weight of countless stories. Heracles among them, Perseus among them, all the figures who passed through trials and left something behind. Not only victories, but patterns of understanding. Athena does not intervene in these final reflections. There is nothing left to correct. The stories have already done their work. They have shaped perception across generations. They have become part of how human experience is interpreted. Even suffering, when viewed through myth, takes on structure, not relief, but shape. And shape is what allows memory to endure as night deepens further. The final image of this section is not of battle or transformation, but of stillness. Athena stands alone in the imagination of Olympus. The owl beside her does not move. Below, the world continues its quiet cycles, birth and loss, growth and decline, beginning and ending. And between all of it, meaning persists, not as certainty, but as awareness. The awareness that nothing is entirely without connection, that even the most fragmented life can be woven into understanding when viewed from a different height. This is perhaps the final gift of Athena in this mythic landscape. Not victory, not power, but perspective. The ability to see a life not only as it happens, but as it forms meaning over time. And in that perspective, Heracles remains present, not as a single figure frozen in achievement, but as a journey that continues to speak, even in silence, even in memory. Even in sleep, the night becomes deeper still. The stars hold steady above an unchanging sky, and the story, like all true myths, does not end. It simply rests, waiting to be heard again. Time does not move in myth the way it moves in human life. It gathers, it settles, it folds stories over one another like layers of earth beneath ancient cities. And beneath those layers, Heracles remains present, not as a living man, not as a distant god alone, but as memory that continues to shape the way people understand endurance. Across Greece, the olive tree becomes one of his quiet symbols, not because it belonged to him alone, but because it represents something he understood more deeply than most. Persistence through seasons, life that continues even after storms, roots that remain anchored while branches move with the wind. Athena's presence in this long memory is inseparable from that image. She is the goddess of the olive tree, of wisdom, of craft, of civilization itself. And civilization, in Greek understanding, is not built in moments of brilliance. It is built slowly, through repetition, through care, through the steady accumulation of knowledge passed from one generation to the next. In later reflections of the myth, Heracles is often imagined not only as a hero who completed labors, but as a figure who changed what labor itself means. Work is no longer just burden. It becomes transformation. Trial becomes structure. Suffering becomes instruction. And Athena stands quietly at the center of this reinterpretation. Not altering events, but shaping how they are understood. As centuries pass in the imagined world of this myth, the stories begin to spread far beyond their place of origin. Sailors carry them across seas. Travelers speak them in foreign lands. Poets reshape them for new audiences, each adding slight variations like new threads woven into an ancient cloth. Heracles may defeat monsters in one version. In another, he outthinks them. In another, he suffers more deeply than before. But always, something essential remains. A movement from chaos toward understanding, from force toward meaning, from isolation toward connection. Athena's owl appears repeatedly in these later tellings, sometimes perched on a temple roof, sometimes flying across a battlefield at the moment of decision, sometimes simply appearing in dreams, silent and unannounced. It is never the same owl in literal terms, but symbolically, it is always the same presence. Attention, clarity, the ability to see without distortion, and in this way, Athena becomes less a character in a story and more a principle within storytelling itself. A reminder that what is seen depends upon how it is seen. As the final reflections of this mythic journey settle, Heracles becomes part of a larger landscape of memory. He stands alongside other figures of Greek imagination, not as isolated legend, but as part of a continuum. Each hero reflects a different aspect of human experience: struggle, wisdom, ambition, loss, transformation, and between them, Athena remains constant, not as the center of every story, but as the thread that connects perception across them all. In quiet moments of imagination, one can picture her standing beneath the olive trees of a timeless Greece. The wind moves gently through their branches. The sea reflects soft evening light. Temples rise in the distance, not as monuments of dominance, but as expressions of remembrance. Nothing here is rushed. Nothing is final. Everything continues in subtle motion. Even Heracles, whose labors once defined the boundaries of possibility, now exists in this softer space, not diminished, but integrated, a life no longer measured by single victories or failures, but by the shape it left behind in collective memory. And that shape continues to influence how strength is understood, not as domination, but as endurance with awareness, as action guided by understanding, as persistence shaped by reflection. Athena's final presence in this section is not dramatic. It is almost imperceptible, an owl lifting silently into the sky at dusk, a shadow passing across olive branches, a moment of clarity that arrives and then dissolves into stillness. And yet that stillness carries everything that came before it, all the trials, all the transformations, all the lessons embedded within them. The story does not conclude with a final answer. It settles into continuity, like a landscape that remains long after footsteps have faded, like memory that continues even when voices fall silent, like wisdom that does not need to speak in order to be present. The olive tree remains, the owl remains, and in the quiet space between them, The meaning of Heracles' journey continues to exist, not as something finished, but as something still understood. The night settles over Greece like a soft closing of the eyes. Mountains fade into silhouette. Olive trees become dark brushstrokes against the horizon. The sea breathes in slow, endless rhythm beneath a sky filled with steady stars. And above all of it, Olympus remains, not as a distant place of thunder and spectacle, but as a quiet height where memory itself seems to gather. Here, the story of Athena and Heracles does not end. It simply becomes still. Heracles is no longer moving through labors, nor struggling through trials that test the limits of strength and endurance. The world no longer demands constant action from him. Instead, what remains is something quieter, presence. In some traditions, he stands among the gods, his mortal life transformed into something beyond ordinary time. In others, he becomes a figure remembered across generations, his story told again and again wherever people gather in the evening light. But in all versions, something essential stays unchanged. He has passed through suffering, and meaning has formed around that passage. Athena watches not as a commander, nor as a distant authority, but as the quiet intelligence that underlies understanding itself. She does not speak. There is no need. The lessons have already been woven into the world. Wisdom does not always announce its arrival. Sometimes it simply remains after everything else has moved on. You can imagine her standing upon the high terraces of Olympus, where wind moves softly through marble columns and the air carries the faint scent of distant storms. Below, the mortal world continues its endless cycles. Cities rise and change, families grow and fade, rivers carve their long paths toward the sea, and through all of it, stories are carried forward. Heracles becomes one of those stories, not as perfection, not as invincibility, but as endurance shaped into meaning. The owl rests nearby, its presence almost indistinguishable from the surrounding night. It does not hunt, it does not call, it simply observes. In that observation, there is a kind of understanding that does not require explanation. Athena's gift to the world is not victory, it is clarity within uncertainty. The ability to see a path even when the world appears fragmented. The ability to recognize structure within chaos. And perhaps, most quietly of all, the ability to continue when certainty is gone. Far below, a final image lingers in the imagination of the myth. A lone olive tree standing against the wind. Its branches move, but do not break. Its roots remain anchored in unseen earth. Its leaves shimmer beneath fading starlight. This is the world that remains after heroes, not empty, not silent in absence, but full of echoes, of choices made, of trials endured, of meaning slowly formed through experience. Heracles' journey is no longer a sequence of events. It has become a pattern the world remembers, a reminder that even the most overwhelming struggles can be moved through, not erased, not avoided, but transformed. And Athena remains within that transformation, not as a final voice, but as the quiet awareness that allows transformation to be understood at all as the night deepens further. Olympus grows still. The stars above do not change. The wind does not hurry. Time itself seems to pause in gentle suspension. There is no final declaration, no closing word, only continuation. Because in myth, endings are rarely endings. They are transitions. Heracles is remembered, Athena remains, and the world below continues to breathe beneath them both. Slow, steady, endless, like sleep arriving not as disappearance, but as return. Return to quiet, return to stillness, return to the part of the mind where stories continue to exist even after they are no longer spoken. And in that stillness, the journey of Athena and the making of heroes rests. Not finished, not lost, but gently held within the night.